Okay. Good evening, everybody. We're just getting started right now. Okay. Just getting ready to get started. How is everybody doing? Okay. Next thing I need, just gathering up all the supplies here. There we go. Okay. Hopefully everybody's had a good week so far. Me, it's been busy because we're getting ready for E3 coverage and whatnot, and I'm taking the week and getting any podcasts that aren't necessarily up on the RSS feed edited and ready to go. So you guys will see a bunch of podcasts hopefully coming up on the RSS feed very soon. There we go. Oh, jeez. I'm just waiting for my crew here. Now, technically, we weren't able to record last week simply because a few of us actually had some technical difficulties. So we just decided, okay, we'll solve these problems and then we'll come back next week. Hopefully, we won't have any problems for the duration or at least the next couple of weeks, especially considering we have E3 coverage and whatnot. And before, I want to at least get one of these guys in here so that we can do the pre-show. And then we'll get into the events of the week in Geek. Let's see here. Here we go. This is what I want. Okay. We are set. Welcome, the Shadow Blazer.
Hello.
So, oh, geez, you're a little loud. That bassy voice. It's like Lando just assaulted my ears. Except I know it's not Lando.
Well, the gain's not too high. I don't know why I'm coming in loud.
You're probably just sitting a little too close at that given moment. Because you came in rather bassy. So I'm like, yeah, that usually happens. That usually happens when I inch into the microphone. And that's how we get the bassiness. So that's probably what happened. All right, so welcome everybody to the Geek News pre-show as we get the summer officially kicked off, because this is kind of the wrap-up week for May. Then we'll bounce into June, and June is where a lot of the fun summer events start kicking off. So let's go ahead and get into the stories that didn't make the cut. And there's quite a bit because there were a few events that happened last week that we wanted to cover, but couldn't really because we had technical difficulties, one of which was actually on the Shadow Blazers end because, well, I guess you just decided that one night to watch Dragon Ball Z and your house responded by breaking.
Yeah,
so
right.
That's basically what happened. We'll get into it more in the podcast. Hopefully there's a funny story behind it. But yeah, so the first story that didn't make the cut, and the reason this didn't make the cut is because the story is resolved. Is the Steam cracking down on visual novels. Some people have started calling it the titty holocaust and all that. The mass exodus of tits from Steam. If you don't know what we're talking about, a lot of steamier visual novels in Steam's library were basically being threatened to basically be taken down. So they officially got emails, their developers, saying that if you do not adhere to Steam's guidelines on this, which you aren't, then we're going to take down your games. And so that basically engaged in a whole process where they decided to warn their fans first, and then they handled it internally. And I think it was resolved, 3 days later, Alex? 4 days?
I don't know. I couldn't find anything about a resolution.
3 or 4 days later, they basically got an email from Steam saying, "Oh yeah, by the way, disregard that whole email. We're not gonna take down your games or whatnot." And so this is one of those things where, again, while this was kind of a controversial topic, we were probably going to bring it up, but it's since been somewhat resolved. So at that point, I know Alex, the Shadow Blazer, has thoughts on this matter. So why don't you go ahead and take it away, my friend?
Yeah. You don't have to like visual novels. You don't have to like anime games. You don't have to like my weebiness. But you can't sit there and say good and not think that this won't affect you at some point. Because today it is the visual novels. Tomorrow, it's Assassin's Creed or insert whatever video game has a scantily clad female in it.
Yesterday it was the Hatred.
Yeah, I mean,
because I'm going to make that comparison again. I'm going to compare these two because their situations are similar.
I did. I ranted about it on Twitter myself, saying it's like great to know that you can allow games that allow you to play as a complete mass murderer, but oh no, a few anime titties freak you out.
Oh, and they apologized for taking that one down. Gabe Newell came out and apologized.
Yes, so Steam.
Can you say double standard?
Double standard.
I think it's just like if you look Gabe Newell up in the phone book, you just get double standard as the definition from the Merriam-Webster dictionary. Is that how that works? or basically definition of flip-flopper, saying he'll do one thing and then not doing it.
Look up double standard in the dictionary. Just see a picture of Gabe Newell
with the troll face. Troll face. In fact, I'm thoroughly convinced that troll face with a grin, I think it's based off of Gabe Newell. I really am. I think it's 100% possible. Okay. Anything else you want to add on that one, Alex?
I mean, you say it's been resolved. I haven't really seen anything on it. It seems
it's been resolved in the okay. Before everybody says this is not a threat that they're dealing with. This is something that was posted from. I can't remember the site's name, but the people who make Honey Pop, where they basically said they got an email saying, "Oh yeah, by the way, disregard that email we sent you." Okay. So the only evidence that I have is from the creator of Honey Pop. Take that for what you will.
Yeah. Fair enough. And so this, to me, it was right. Even though there's still other people were pointing out other games that, not just besides the ultra-violent games, but like other games with pervasive sexual content and nudity that were being left entirely alone. And so that to me just says Steam and Valve, they're going after the niche visual novel market because they know the blowback won't be as strong, and then they can just quietly move along into the night. But little did they know, we're loudmouths and we're going to speak up.
I don't even think it was that. I don't think they specifically targeted the visual novel crowd. I think it was just basically Valve wanted to flex some muscle. They picked a target and then they went with it, kind of thing. I think that they got sick and tired of people saying that they don't flex their muscle at all and decided, okay, we're going to flex our muscle. You're the target. And then they did that, and then lo and behold, 2 or 3 days later, they decide, oh no, that was a bad idea. We shouldn't have done that. You know,
it's more like it's more like they're flexing their muscle, but they're not even swinging at the target that we actually want them to hit.
Yeah, I don't want to adhere to the rumors of like, because apparently there's a whole thread now that on the internet somewhere that Gabe Newell is anti-anime, and like any anime game he just wants removed from Steam. I don't think Gabe cares at this point. Gabe is too busy running Steam to care. So at that point, my viewpoint on the matter is, it was just they picked a target out of nowhere, said, you will feel the wrath of Steam so that people know that we are actually a wrathful company, and then they didn't go through with it.
Yeah, if only they actually directed that wrath towards companies that actually deserve it.
Yeah, like asset flippers and a bunch of other problems on the Steam community. And I've already kind of said my opinion to Alex, but I'll go ahead and just point it out here. For the record, is that I was not against them doing it. And here's the main reason, because I was going to basically state this. If you're going to pull that trigger, and it's a trigger to be pulled, if you're going to pull it, then you better be ready for every stinking consequence that comes down the line, including those who are going to say that you are freaking hypocrites because this type of game is still allowed on Steam, but this one isn't. And you better be ready to pull those triggers too. And well, Steam did what I thought they were going to do. As soon as I saw the story from the get-go, they were going to pull a hatred again. The only thing I'm surprised that didn't happen was the personal apology from Gabe Newell. That's like the only step out of the whole hatred thing that didn't happen here. So at that point, like I looked at that story and went, this ain't going to stand. Because Steam is going to go, they're going to come back crawling back to everybody with their tail between their legs and say, we're sorry. Because the second that they see any kind of outcry, they're going to back off. So, you know, this is one of those amazing times where Steam shows that they absolutely have no backbone. And at that point, that's literally my viewpoint on the matter. They are Steam. They have the right to be able to take these games off their market. It is their marketplace. But when you pull that trigger, you better be ready for everything that's going to come your way. Everything. And you better adhere to it.
Yep.
Because the second that you don't, that is just going to be that one. That's going to be that one moment where you turn your neck like this and the internet went, you know, like, and just went for the jugular. And then I think we got enough time to go into one more. And this one we'll bring up because I know that Romney wants to talk about it, but because he was the one that contributed to the story, and a few listeners reached out to us on the matter, but, well, they reached out on something else that will make it, and that is She-Ra. Apparently She-Ra is getting a new Netflix series, and I wish I could say I cared. But spoiler alert, people. I wasn't a He-Man fan as a kid, and therefore wasn't a She-Ra fan.
Considering tonight's agenda does have another discussion of an animated
the only reason it made the agenda was because more people requested that.
Yeah. And the reason I mentioned the She-Ra thing is because it kind of served as a nice counterpoint, because the new She-Ra series is being produced by DreamWorks, and we saw how well they did with Voltron Legendary Defender, and so it created a nice counterpoint of, okay, well, you've got one that is not being handled with care, and then you have, on the opposite end of the spectrum, a show that you can tell it's like, hey, let's actually do a good job with this, because it did well with Voltron.
Yeah, and we do actually have some castings here, but I'm just going to go down the line. Like, if you have access to Netflix, are you going to be watching She-Ra? I'm not.
I'd at least check out one episode to see what they did with it. Just given what we got with the He-Man revival back in the early 2000s and how they actually tried to do it pretty well, I figured, okay, let's actually see how well they handle She-Ra, especially in this day and age where more people are calling for more girl power-centric shows. I'm just like, okay, let's actually see if they can actually do this character right in this day and age, since it didn't really work back in the 80s.
Yeah, I'll just be honest here. Like, I kind of might take your route, Romney. Like, it is DreamWorks, and DreamWorks has done an amazing job with Voltron Legendary Defender, so I might try that first episode, but part of the reason that people are going to be watching this is the nostalgia factor, and I don't have that. Like, I watched Transformers, I didn't watch He-Man, and I didn't watch G.I. Joe. So at that point, I don't have that nostalgic factor. I think my sister watched She-Ra once and kind of threw it off instead, going to Gem. And that's like my exposure. So at that point, I'm not necessarily walking in going, oh, you know, totally a She-Ra fan and go She-Ra and all that. I'm kind of vaguely not interested. But you did bring up that He-Man reboot on Cartoon Network way back when. That was pretty good. Even I'll admit it was pretty good looking.
Yeah, and so it's kind of a case of, hey, at least if we're going to get a decent reboot, it's a case of, okay, I'll at least check out the first episode, see if it actually hooks me in. Honestly, I kind of hope DreamWorks decides to take on another Filmation property, Brave Star, because Brave Star, like, best case scenario, if you handed off a property like Brave Star to a company like, trying to think off the top of my head, like, if you decided to give Brave Star the Voltron Legendary Defender treatment, you basically would have a very kick-ass space western.
I'm aware of Brave Star, but I don't think I ever saw an episode. So that might be an interesting one.
Well, yeah, I mainly saw it because, well, for those of you who live in Utah, we have a digital channel called Cubo, and at night they do their Cubo Night Owl, which is basically reruns of old Filmation shows like He-Man, She-Ra, and Brave Star. And out of the three, Brave Star, it's weird because Brave Star is actually the most serious and even kind of the darkest of the three because it actually tackles issues like drug addiction and actual, like, it's basically a Western.
Here's the thing, like, Brave Star is so out there anyway. Like, I know it, just the name. I don't know necessarily the series, but Brave Star is one of those things where it actually might be really successful simply because not really a whole lot of people know about it. There is a fan base, but there's not like a big one. And it doesn't necessarily, like, if you could take some liberties with it, and you could actually, you know, as long as you adhere to the main story of it, you could actually walk away with something that everybody loved on the matter. That's kind of the potential that another series that we are going to be covering later tonight had when they were originally adopted by Cartoon Network, and, well, it was squandered. I'm not going to spoil it yet because you guys will see it, and it's going to piss you off. At least it's pissed off most of the internet. It's according to what I've been able to tell, it's a 70-30 split. It's pissed off most of the internet. Because and here's the thing, the 30% is basically kind of like me, where we're going, like we're not hating it. It's not like it raped my childhood. It's just like, That's most of the 30% right there. And then you have like that 5% of that, and it's just like, so that's the way it goes. That's the way it's gonna be tonight. Okay, well, that's pretty much our pre-show. So, and we're actually really close to getting ready to go tonight. So let's go ahead and get things started, shall we?
Yep, just need to set up the microphone, which I completely forgot to do because I'm just like, oh, something's missing. That's what's missing.
That's kind of an important tool.
Yes, indeed. Indeed.
All right. Let me know when you're ready to go, Alex.
I'm ready.
Okay.
Almost.
Got everything ready to go. And feel free to let us know you guys' viewpoints on She-Ra and we need some Tittygate. Is that the best thing to call this about? Like Titty Scene Gate?
As much as I hate attaching gate to anything remotely scandalous.
But that's how people are responding to it.
Just honestly, like, Anime Titty Holocaust just, it flows better.
It really does.
Yeah.
Yes.
Let's go with Anime Titty Holocaust.
Yes. Because like for as much outrage as actually went out, I don't know how many people I actually had to look directly in the eye and go, you realize Steam is going to renege on this in like 2 days, right? Like, no, this time they're serious. Sure. That's never happened, people.
All right, sound speed.
All right. 3, 2, 1. Okay. Got to bring everything back up. That's the sad reality here, guys, is that I have to bring everything back up. There we go. Welcome, everybody, to another awesome episode of Geek News, Reviews, and Opinions, the podcast where we talk the week's events in Geek for Friday night, May 25th, 2018. I'm your host, Adam Mickelson, a.k.a. Drac. I hope everybody's had an awesome week. For me, it's just busy, because we're getting ready for some of the bigger summer events, including freaking E3 is around the corner. So I got to start getting prepped for that and getting ready for all of the YouTube content that's probably going to be happening there. But of course, I'm being joined by my fellow panelists, fellow geeks, fellow YouTubers, fellow reviewers, fellow awesome guys in general. And if you guys aren't following them, well, damn it, you should be. And we're going to start things off with Stephen Romney of Studio Ghost Utah, of From the Shelf, Rhapsody in Cinema, Martial March, Monster Clash, all of that fun stuff. Basically, like I've said, when he takes out the camera, just magic happens. Stephen Romney, how you doing?
I'm doing all right. I mean, the week was a bit sketchy as a whole, but can't really complain too far. I mean, I'm just trying to think of something worth noting. I did finally try playing online in Dragon Ball FighterZ and got thoroughly Yamcha'd.
Yeah, I've kind of had that issue a couple of times too. But actually, that reminds me, I might need to get your ID on PlayStation. I thought I had it, and there have been a couple of times where I've gotten on fighters. I'm like, man, he should probably be on right now. I should totally invite him and just we'll have some versus matches or something.
Yeah, the main reason is mainly just because I happened to get to try out a 14-day trial of PlayStation Plus, so I figured, why not?
Sure. And then also we are being joined by the Shadow Blazer himself, Alex Short, who is joining us out of the comfort of the shadows and actually out of his lawsuit in the shadows, because he is currently suing Todd for only being in the shadows when his hood allows him to be. Alex, how's that lawsuit going?
Not good, because Todd kind of has a bit of time on me as far as shadows go, but it's progressing slowly but surely.
Is he good? Is he in good standing with a lot of the Lords of Shadow
yes.
that are supporting him in this case? He's got all the politics going his way.
Much better than me, because he's very much predominantly in the shadows in all his videos, where I'm always predominantly in the light. That's what happens when you come out of the shadows to do your work.
Well, yeah, plus that he was able to amass that massive power grab after that Belmont incident where most of the Lords of Shadow got killed off.
Indeed. That definitely helped him out. So I don't know, man. I don't think you're going to be winning that lawsuit anytime soon. But that's okay, because you're here, and we're here to talk the week's events in Geek. And we're just going to go ahead and start things off, unfortunately, on a somber note, because this story literally broke yesterday. And everybody's been wanting to put their 2 cents in, so we'll go ahead and do so, especially since we have to follow up. A couple of years ago, we covered a story. This is basically back when we had just transitioned. Either we were at Radio SLCC at the time, or we transitioned to YouTube at that point, where it was official that Total Biscuit, or John Bain, as he's known in real life, was basically bowing out of social media. And the reason he was bowing out is because he had been diagnosed with terminal cancer. It was kind of getting the better of him, and he was sick and tired of dealing with all of the obnoxiousness on Twitter, Facebook, all that stuff. And basically said, to heck with y'all, I'm just going to do my thing, and for as long as I'm able to do that. Well, sadly, we have to report that it is officially confirmed the cancer finally got the better of him. And at the age of 33, John Total Biscuit Bain has since passed away. And I believe the cause of it was, in fact, the cancer, or complications due to the cancer. We don't necessarily know too much on that, and I don't think we will. But it is a sad state of affairs, because John Bain, a.k.a. Total Biscuit, has had a long storied career on the internet. He started back in 2005 on the podcast World of Warcraft Radio that went till 2010. Then he joined a YouTube network making videos on World of Warcraft. He was also a StarCraft 2 commentator or shoutcaster, and in fact, he actually branched out into coverage at BlizzCon for StarCraft 2. I think he did a little bit of Heroes of the Storm, and I know he did Hearthstone. So he was quite beloved by that community. He also was the sponsor and manager of the pro team Axiom, and was best known for his YouTube channel Total Biscuit, or otherwise known as Total Halibut, for a while there, where he did game reviews, he did World of Warcraft videos, and he also hosted his own podcast, the Co-Optional podcast with Jesse Cox, friends Jesse Cox and Dodger. So, and then a random guest that would be happening. So unfortunately, he is not going to be able to do any of that anymore. He has sadly passed on. And it looks like that he's left most of those rights to his wife, Jenna Bain, who I believe they're talking is still going to continue on the Co-Optional podcast with Jesse and Dodger, and they'll go for as long as they possibly can. But they also have kind of made it where his YouTube videos at least will remain up, so that because it was his it was his one of his last wishes that his family be able to get whatever they can out of those videos, out of whatever he has created. So let's just go ahead and go down the line. I'll go last. Our thoughts on the passing of John Total Biscuit Bain. Alex, Romney, anything?
Not too much. I mean, I didn't really watch a lot of his videos, but I was familiar with his work. And I do remember when we covered the story, he handled himself as well as he did. And he at least showed it basically with the way he conducted himself reporting on certain stories and stuff like that. He did demonstrate a fair bit of integrity, which is important with a lot of stuff like this. I remember the first of his videos I saw was in regards to, like, I think it was called like Day One Gary's incident and that whole
that controversial video.
And that was my first taste of Total Biscuit. And so it's a case of, well, my heart does go out to his family. I mean, it's sad, but at least he kind of also had the sense that he knew to kind of get everything in order, so that way it didn't blindside anyone. So it's sad, but it's not really something that's like that I'm taken aback by, since he made it clear, hey, yeah, this is what it is. And so, yeah, like I obviously feel for his family, but I don't really have much else I can really add since I didn't really watch a lot of his content.
Yeah, and one of the reasons that people might be confused as to why he took such steps. He was already told. I think the details were he had a rare enough terminal cancer that they couldn't do anything about it. Like radiation wouldn't have done anything, chemo wouldn't have done anything. So at that point, he was basically trying to cover all the bases in that time.
Yeah, because it even said in the article that the effectiveness of chemo had basically been exhausted at that point when he announced his retirement. So it very much was a tragic case of, hey, he knows it's going to happen, so rather than have him stress out over social media and end up in the grave sooner, he chose to basically bow out and basically like, hey, I'm going to enjoy what time I have left.
Yeah, pretty much. And so one of the ways that he did that was, I want to say that he completely abandoned social media. That turned out wrong, because he would come back eventually and kind of be himself. But he didn't handle a majority of the social media stuff anymore, simply because of his condition. And if he was going to go out, then he was going to go out the way he wanted to, which was having a good time and producing the content that he wanted to make. So that was kind of his decision. But I mean, we have seen, and we have commented on statements that he has since made on Twitter and Facebook and all that. So we should point that out. Alex, your thoughts on Total Biscuit?
Fortunately, not a lot to say on my end, because I really didn't follow his content. It is sad to see him go. He leaves behind his wife, who clearly loved him. She wrote this very lovely tribute poem to him. And I just hope that he had a final good run here, that it wasn't too bad, that he managed to deal with the cancer. It's a little shocking because he's not much older than me. He's 33. I'm almost 30. So just a few short years older. Yeah, life is short. Life is precious.
Yep. This is kind of the same situation that we had before. I think we had Aldo there too, and Aldo and me kind of had more exposure than you guys did to Total Biscuit. And at that time, we were both kind of shocked by it, because that was the first time that we had heard about the cancer and that it was where it was. And I remember putting out a very heartfelt statement towards him. I have watched his content. I think he's a worthwhile commentator. He can get the job done, especially in Blizzard games. He's kind of one of the reasons that I would watch a lot of those shoutcastings of StarCraft 2 and all that, because I did like that deep voice, being able to do a play-by-play of everything that was going on. I wish I could say that I was going to have that exact statement now, but sadly, a couple of years later, after that when we covered that story. Things have happened since then. I've learned a lot more about the guy. And while I do think that he did some worthwhile contributions on YouTube, the Co-optional podcast is entertaining. And he did help out in a lot of those, we brought up the Day One Gary's incident fiasco where he was helping out with other channels that were getting their content banned because of that. He helped out with the Alex Maurer situation and a number of others. Like anybody who was getting their content censored or taken down, he was usually like, if somebody had a contact to him, then he would help out via his YouTube contacts. So you have those awesome contributions that were happening, but you also had him kind of being, well, I'm not going to hide it, an asshole to a lot of people online, content creators and fans alike. I've seen numerous videos since then from people who were devoted fans of Total Biscuit, and then after incidents like CoxCon and even stuff earlier than that, where he just kind of didn't deserve it at that point. And it could just be that around that time the cancer had taken in, and no Fs were given, and he just didn't care what he was saying to people anymore. But that's kind of unfortunately jaded my opinion on the guy. So I can at least say that it is my sincerest hope that he was able to find the peace that he needed to be able to finally pass, as well as be able to get through the difficult times and the painful times with the cancer. But can I say that I'm going to miss the guy? It's a 50-50 thing. It's definitely to a point where if I actually did have the ability to go to his funeral, and I don't, I probably wouldn't. Because the bottom line is it sucks he's gone, but he also had kind of a 50-50 relationship with the internet, and his bad stuff is going to kind of outshine his good stuff, in my opinion. So thank you so much for all that you were able to do, Total Biscuit. Thank you for your hard work, your contributions, your videos, all that stuff. But we can only hope that, or at least my thoughts and prayers go to your family and loved ones, to make sure they can get over this. And that's pretty much all I've got. I wish I could say I had a lot more positive things to say about Total Biscuit, but in recent years, I kind of don't. I'm not even a subscriber to him anymore. So that's just how nasty things got. Final thoughts before we move on here. I know that some people are not going to like what I have to say on the matter, but I'm going to be honest on the matter. In fact, I'm kind of doing this out of inspiration after seeing a few other people on Twitter go and just not being disrespectful, but being upfront with their viewpoints on Total Biscuit. One of which I found really funny that he met Total Biscuit one day, and Total Biscuit acted like an asshole to him, and he never understood why. And this is a fellow podcaster. He never understood why, and they never resolved it. So that's just, unfortunately, kind of the guy you were also dealing with on those occasions.
Yeah. But it's to be said, like anything, and it's something that we need to be aware of whenever anyone noteworthy passes away, is that no one's entirely a saint, no one's entirely a monster. Humans are humans. There are some have done a lot of good things, also a lot of bad. You've got to kind of you basically got to take the good with the bad and vice versa. And basically, he was human. That's the biggest takeaway here.
And what I'm basically trying to do here is I wish no ill will upon his dead body. Like it's not that like I'm going to go out and find his grave and spit on it. I don't care. I'm not pissed off enough at his actions to want to do that. I'm being respectful, but at the same time, I'm acknowledging that he was human and he had his faults. And that's probably I honestly think that's the best way to be able to acknowledge him, because that's what he made his job on YouTube to be. When he made criticisms of game developers and YouTubers, these were the criticisms that he made. Okay, so that's the way to be able to look at it. Moving on into the next story, and it's a little bit of a Nintendo talk, but kind of a sad one. Well, not for Nintendo. Not for Nintendo.
Depending on who you ask, really.
Yeah, so people might remember a couple of months ago. In fact, we got stories requesting it, but I couldn't ever find like official details of like how this was actually able to happen, aside from it was an OS hack that you could do. But we found out a couple of months ago that it was actually really easy to homebrew or hack the Switch. And now people are kind of regretting that they ever did that, because as we have in this story from a guy on Twitter by the name of Shiny Quagsire, when you do that, Nintendo tends to not get very happy about it. So a lot of these hackers who actually did try to use the operating system hack are now officially banned from Nintendo services. And we're talking all of them, people. They cannot use the eShop. They cannot use the community features, and they're officially banned from the upcoming online services. So yeah, in particular, the one that we're talking about, Shiny Quagsire, he got an error message whenever he tried to get onto online services, and it was officially restricted. When he responded out, or when he reached out to Nintendo, he got this response: "Hello. Thank you for patiently awaiting for a reply on your situation. Unfortunately, given the information that you have provided, we will be unable to cancel the ban on your system. I understand this isn't what you wanted to hear, and certainly appreciate your understanding in this matter. For more information, please review on our support site, support.nintendo.com, the end-user licensing agreement that pertains to your system."
So, long story short, Nintendo basically said, "Sorry, Shiny Quagsire, our fucks are in another castle."
Yep, pretty much. They pulled a toad on him, and not him. Like we're actually hearing there was quite a number of people that did this OS hack and are now officially banned from any of those services. So I guess the first thing to ask here is, does that mean, like, because one of the questions that we actually got on this ban is, does this ban them from getting another Switch and being able to use the services on that? I don't think it does. I think they just basically said this Switch with this code cannot access anything like that.
Actually, the story reports differently, where the Switch that Shiny Quagsire had was one that he didn't hack, that he wasn't able to access the services, raising the question of, did Nintendo track him from the hacked Switch to the new Switch? Meaning that that's the thing that people are worried about is, does Nintendo have a way to track someone who previously hacked into Nintendo hardware? And that's what Shiny Quagsire is specifically dealing with, is that he had hacked a Switch, but then he bought a new Switch that wasn't hacked so that he could.
And that's where he got this official announcement. Okay, or this official reply.
Yeah, meaning that they somehow tracked his account. So it's probably locked to his Nintendo ID and to his email. So probably the only way around it is to buy a new Switch and use completely new credentials. But even then, that's not a guarantee because, again, Nintendo will probably find a way.
Well, yeah, because one question that we actually got is, did Nintendo like track down his ISP or his IP address, and now anything that comes out of that IP address is going to be banned? I don't know if they're going to do that, because I don't know everything about IP addresses, but IP addresses are kind of broad. So at that point, like, I have my own IP address, but my neighbor's probably using something very, very, very similar to it.
Yeah, and but at the same time, it is pretty easy to ban someone based on their IP address. That's something that sites like TV Tropes have had to do quite often when people would spoof their IP addresses, whether through a VPN or through leeching off someone else's IP address to get around bans. And so that probably is a way Nintendo is able to track who is connecting to their servers. So
at this point, basically, he's probably looking at he's got to move.
Yeah, moving is not even necessarily a guarantee, because if he still has the same email address, stuff like that, I mean, there's a reason that EULAs are written as long as they are, because they know most people aren't actually going to read them, and so chances are he's screwed.
Yeah, and it surprises me that, like, how many people in the homebrew community don't actually read what those things contain. Because the bottom line is that they will bite you in the ass.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't read every single EULA, but I've read a majority of them. And, I've gotten the gist of what's in them, and some of them read very alphabetically. And it's just a good idea to read them, because if you break their rules, they are going to come on top of you. They're going to bite as quick as they can.
Yep, and that's the tricky thing, because EULAs are contracts of adhesion, meaning you have to agree to them in order to use their services. And with how we're moving more and more into digital-based gaming as opposed to physical media, it's going to be a lot harder to play games without having to agree to a EULA in some way, shape, or form.
But I do agree with this article's moral of the story, which is just to simply not hack your favorite systems. Don't do it. Stop doing it. You're paying good money for this stuff, guys.
Or at the very least, wait until at least Nintendo's decided to move on to another system before you start hacking it.
Yeah, I agree on that one, but like, this is one of those things where I just kind of don't understand the homebrew community, because my argument on the matter is just, you already paid $400, $500, $600, $200, $300 on these things. Why are you going out of your way to break them? Just so that you can load them up with whatever you want.
Adam, may I remind you, you and I have a homebrew 3DS that we're currently using.
This is true, but here's the thing.
I don't think.
But here's the thing: if they came out with a freaking cable where I could play it on a damn TV, I'd be dropping that shit.
Of course, but they won't. So that's why we had to resort to homebrews.
Yeah. Plus, there's another thing to consider, that sometimes homebrew is a way some people get into game design, especially when you consider how popular the R4 cart was for the DS. That was how some people cut their teeth on designing games and distributing them. And so there is something to be said. There are some positives of the homebrew community, but like anything, there are also a lot of negatives.
But that adheres to your original argument, Romney, because a lot of people who do this to get into game design, they're not hacking current gen. They're hacking 1 or 2 gens back when, like, official support is gone on those systems. And so at that point, they go back and they homebrew them so that they can actually create their own games. I don't necessarily have any problem with that. My problem is when you paid $500 for your current existing run-of-the-mill that is being watched system and hack that, and then basically shove $500 down the drain because you know that they're watching.
Yeah, it's a tricky thing, but honestly, the fact that this is happening is not surprising in the least. No. I mean, what the hell did you expect, people?
The only thing that was surprising to me is that, as the internet does, there's a movement basically saying, oh, evil Nintendo, they made the choice to hack their systems. You shouldn't just ban them permanently. It's in their EULA, people.
Yep.
They're empowered to do so.
Yeah. Look, if you want to hack your system, I mean, it is your system, it's your money. That's fine, but you can't cry when you get in trouble for it. Yeah. That is the risk you have to be willing to take if you're going to sidestep the boundaries of what a thing is. I get it. And look, I think most homebrewers are they're tinkerers. They're curious how the hardware works, how the system works. They are people who are interested in game design. Right? And it can be fun to tinker with hardware. I'm not skilled at that, capable, which is why I'll never do it myself. But you gotta make sure you do it with caution. But there's also, of course, that subset out there that do use it for nefarious purposes. They hack games to, screw with the multiplayer aspect, or to cheat, or to do other things. So, of course, Nintendo has to be, and any company would do this. Sony would do this. Microsoft would do this. Steam will probably do it too. They're going to have to be draconian because people will take advantage of it. So Nintendo, I think, is fine in the right to ban the guy.
So you're limiting things just to console developers and Steam. And the reason I'm saying console developer with Steam is because Steam does kind of own the licensing to be able to do those Steam machines, if they even care about them anymore. But it's not just them. The developers themselves, the game developers themselves, are literally going out of their way to make sure this crap doesn't get hacked. And if it does, basically writing in their own code to personally destroy the hacker's hardware. Okay, or to destroy their experiences.
I can't remember which one, but there's this great FPS game that will punish a hacker or a cheater by turning all their ammo into chicken.
Crysis did it. Then there was another one. I think it was Serious Sam that did a pink scorpion would follow you.
The pink roided up scorpion that will follow you throughout the entire game that you cannot kill.
Yep. Or the one that actually makes me laugh every time I look at it, which is Video Game Tycoon. If you hack that game, then basically what happens is your game gets hacked and you can't ever finish, or you can't finish your game or you can't finish the game because your thing got hacked and you lost all your money.
Yeah. I mean, some of the ones that Nintendo puts in for Pokemon are straight up disturbing. There's the one where it's just where literally you're going to a certain area that's just oh, if you like this thing, buy it or die.
Yes.
The cruelest one, though, is for Dragon Quest IV. Because Dragon Quest IV, if you hack it, they literally make it so that every single step you take in the game triggers an enemy encounter. Yep. Even if you're in a town, every single time you move one square, an enemy encounter. Which means you're basically stuck in hell fighting slimes.
And of course, Earthbound is like unfinishable if you hack it, if you try to emulate it.
Yep. So basically the lesson to take out of this, people, is that game developers are sadistic bastards when you mess around with the money that they're putting food on the table with. So don't screw around with them.
I'm surprised nobody's made a Saw movie based around this sort of concept yet.
They could. They were like,
give it time.
Give it time, right? Like Ready Player One Hacked Edition. It's going to be nasty as hell. Like you instantly get zeroed out like 5 seconds walking in, and that's all that happens every single time.
Yeah, or that's when you like. I mean, the cruelest way would be like, oh, you have a game company that makes this elevator picture. It's like, oh, a game company that makes a fun, kid-friendly game, and then someone hacks it, and they basically have to deal with Jigsaw, and that's the story.
That was actually, you brought up elevators. That was another hack that somebody did. I can't remember which game it was, but there's a scene in the demo in the first. So the demo covers the first act, and there's a point in that first act where you get on an elevator. If you're playing on a hacked version, you stay on the elevator forever. Like you could log out of the game and log back in. You're on the elevator. And that's it.
That's the elevator from Evangelion, only worse.
Oh, far worse, because there's not even Ray and Asuka to entertain you. There's just elevator going nowhere, constantly going up. So there you go. That should be a lesson to all hackers. If you're going to do it, I have no problem with you doing it when Nintendo, Sony, Microsoft, and all them, when they're not watching, okay? When they're not actively caring. They've disengaged their support for it, all that stuff. If you're doing it for current day hardware, you kind of deserve what's coming your way.
Mm-hmm. It's like the people who threw a fit when they got banned from Pokemon Sun and Moon because they hacked Pokemon Sun and Moon and played a pirated copy ahead of release. I mean, what the hell were you expecting, people?
Yeah, what was the details of that? It was like, so they basically made it so I think you couldn't even play Sun and Moon on that 3DS anymore, right?
No, you were basically permabanned.
Yeah, so like you weren't even allowed to. It wasn't like you could play the game offline. You couldn't play the game, period, on that 3DS. You were done. Your Pokemon days were numbered, son. All right. Well, the next thing that we've actually going to get into is kind of a new feature that I'm looking to implement over the summer, which is a lot of people love it when we get into these geeky discussions on specific topics, and we put a good deal of time and effort into the podcast to be able to go into those. And so we're going to start up this official new segment on the podcast, which is what I'd like to dub a geeky discussion. Or the other working title is a game of geek. So one of those two. And this one is kind of hard to explain, but I'm going to try and do it as best as I can. Because even when I did this for the agenda, I had kind of a rough understanding of the situation. And unfortunately, I had that letter written somewhere and I can't seem to find it. But so a listener wrote into us and explained a situation that they've been having. They basically were looking to, as most of us who have like a boyfriend or a girlfriend that isn't a geek, that isn't into gaming, isn't into Star Trek or whatever, and trying to bring them into the fandom because you believe that they would enjoy it just as much as you do. And in this particular situation, that lasted for this listener about 7 days. And then the girlfriend refused, and here's how it basically started up. She decided that she liked one of the games that he was playing, which turned out to be PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds. And so she decided, I want to try and play this game myself. And, he helped her out a little bit. But one day when she was home on her own, I'm not even sure on the details of this because I asked about it from the listener. And he's a person that I know. And I don't have all the details, but basically he came home from work one day and she was in tears. And that pretty much solidified she never wanted to touch PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds ever again. She had pretty much written off gaming. She's kind of anti-gaming at this point. Not happy with the medium whatsoever. And that actually got him into thinking of like, unfortunately, we're dealing with a lot of communities now that are what we would consider to be toxic, where you have that trollish element where people will mess with each other or people will just be absolutely rude to each other. And if you're brand spanking new to it, like, how do you avoid these toxic elements? And I'm not necessarily just saying that it's, excuse me. It's not necessarily just that you're dealing with these trolls or people who are just outright trying to be mean to each other, but you also deal with a toxic element within some communities where if you don't have the measure of knowledge on this medium that person has, you are immediately considered inferior and ostracized from the community because it just so happens this guy has a lot of pull, kind of thing. And so a lot of these situations can happen in communities that a lot of us or average people consider to be toxic. So is it possible for a brand spanking new fan to join an existing community if they're toxic, if they have those toxic elements? And if it is possible, like, what steps need to be taken? And if not, how can the situation be improved? Like, how as community members of Star Trek, can we improve this situation so that new people can come in and we can all bask in the glory that is Star Trek, Castlevania, anime, all that fun stuff? And there you go. That's kind of our discussion for the night. And I've already kind of talked quite a bit here, so I'm going to let you guys kind of take over for a little bit. What do you guys' take on this particular situation? Is it possible when you do have those toxic elements within a community to be able to be a fan of that community or to be a fan of that particular show and be able to commune with fellow fans of the show? Kind of thing. I'm gonna go ahead and start things off with Romney. Romney, what's your take on it?
Well, I'm not quite sure how to answer the question since I'm kind of the antisocial weirdo where I don't really engage in fan communities, period, because of just how toxic they tend to be no matter what fandom. So I just choose to focus on, watching the thing or playing the game and not really interacting. I don't go on forums. I don't go into chats because I don't want to deal with any of that crap. I basically go the case of, oh, this seems interesting. Oh, the fans are awful people. Fuck the fandom.
Yeah. This was something that I used to be, I'm kind of guilty of that too. I used to do it. I used to go to some of these fan forums and just see the discussions that were happening on it. In some cases actually contributing to them. And one in particular that personally pissed me off, and I actually never went back to that forum, was around the time Gundam 00 was halfway into its second season. And so I came across this community where a lot of people were absolute fans of it. And then there was like this dedicated fan base within it that was pro everything before Gundam 00. I'm not even kidding. Like, everything before it was gold and 00 was like shit as far as anybody was concerned. And I remember one argument happening on that forum that pissed me off to such a degree where a guy was calling the main character Setsuna F-Sei by his actual name, which I guess I can go ahead and spoil because it's been out for a while, and refer to him as his actual name, Soran Ibrahim, which you do find out his actual name. You find it out eventually in the show, and the guy just decided, I'm going to use that name from here on. And immediately got like a 20-person dogpile in that forum of, how dare you use that name? It's Setsuna. We're talking a guy who had been there far longer than me. And the second that he used his other name, this guy was just like ostracized from the community. His opinions were immediately shouted down in the forums. They were immediately considered stupid. And he was never, ever given a reason why he was getting such horrible treatment. And I'll admit, like, I didn't even leave a message on this one. I left. I was like sitting there going, well, this was great while it lasted, but now I want nothing to do with this community, because if somebody, displays a moniker of individuality or has any kind of moniker of not understanding how the story works, they're just going to instantly get dogpiled like that. That's stupid. is absolutely stupid, because that's the purpose of being able to expand fandom, is to expand it, to get new people into it.
Yeah, and that's kind of why I don't really bother with it. And I remember back, I mean, some people may remember, for those of you who remember, hey, I used to be a reporter. I actually wrote articles about this sort of thing, and literally, like, in the article where I discussed, titled The Strange and Terrifying World of Fan Art, I discussed about this very issue. Granted, I used the bronies as target practice because that was the most current instance where that was happening, because the community surrounding My Little Pony had become incredibly toxic. And it's also the same case as a JoJo fan. I avoid any JoJo fan, like, anything, because, again, it's absolute nightmare fuel. I mean, people think bronies are bad. The JoJo fan base, especially in Japan, is much worse. Much worse.
Well, and let's kind of clarify that. You'll watch the series. You might even watch some commentary that some YouTubers might have, but it's not like you're going out of your way to contribute to this community kind of thing.
Nope. I pretty much just choose to love the thing and not really interact with anyone. I mean, if people talk about it in person, that's fine. But you're not going to see me on any forums. I put that hole behind me after I quit Gaia Online.
Yeah, so Alex, I'm pretty sure you've had to deal with your fair share of toxic communities. You have any stories that you want to be able to share?
Well, I definitely have, but there's none that I really want to share. But yes, I've had to deal with some toxicity.
I mean, you and me have made jokes about the Sonic community.
Yeah, certainly. You know? And besides that, obviously, there's been others I've had to put up with, and ones that I let myself definitely get too bogged down into before having to take the Romney approach and just say, fuck it, I'm out of here, and just go enjoy what I enjoy. Frankly, if you can, I think just if there is that sense of community or that sense of belonging you want to, and I get it, then and maybe one aspect about it is too toxic, splinter off, see where else you can find it, see maybe if you could bring a few other people who might also hate the toxicity of a certain community to come with you and go form your own quote unquote paradise. If that doesn't work, then of course the best way is to just simply disconnect and just continue to enjoy what you enjoy.
Okay, so we're kind of getting into the solution of it, but I at least wanted to explain that yes, there are toxic communities out there, and here's the thing: even to a community that isn't considered to be toxic, there is toxic elements. The thankful, because I find it funny that you actually wrote a story on this too, because I actually did one as well, and the paper rejected mine, and it's simply, and I'm not even kidding when I say this, Romney, mine was rejected because it was quote uneventful. Because I reported on a community that, in my opinion, had the best solution for a lot of the stuff, because it was a podcasting community that was centered around, I think at the time, 15, 20 podcasts. It's since gone up to like 30 plus at this point. And basically what would happen is the community was so tight knit together that when that toxic element came in, it was just ignored. Like you saw in forum posts, this person would put up something really, really trollish. Nothing would happen. Nobody would acknowledge it. They'd leave it alone. And the guy was gone like a day later. And it's because he wasn't getting the attention he craved or she craved. And so at that point, I made an article on it going like, this is the perfect way to be able to handle all this. And my story was considered uneventful because nothing happened. I'm like, but that's the glory of it. It's like nothing happened.
Yeah, and oddly enough, I actually looked up the article that I wrote. So I wrote two articles, one called The Strange and Terrifying World of Fan Art, and probably the most telling one is called How Fandoms Ultimately Hurt the Things They Love. I'm going to go ahead and post it to Twitter right now, so that way, if people want to see how I used to write as a reporter, and, well, if you want to also see how many TV tropes links I can put into a single article, this is also good for that.
Yes, exactly. So, yeah, now that we've kind of explained it, yes, and here's the thing. A lot of this year has been a lot of communities going toxic. Like we've mentioned in the past, the Magic the Gathering community is having a lot of issues right now. The Overwatch community, I mean, since the inception of the Overwatch League, they've been having lots of issues themselves. These communities can tend to be there, but now that Alex has kind of gone there, how do we solve this? So like, can these communities be fixed? Can these communities eventually lose their toxic element, kind of thing? So like, could we eventually in like 10 years time see, for example, League of Legends is considered to be a very toxic community. In 10 years time, could we actually, like, if we did this, and this, the community immediately become less toxic?
Well, it's hard to say. I mean, one thing I have noticed, and a lot of it, and again, using bronies as target practice, so this is something the show itself, and again, it's history repeating itself, but this is something that the show itself did, and it's actually something kind of fascinating where the My Little Pony community has kind of cooled down a little bit, and that's mainly because the people writing the show kind of realized, hey, let's stop trying to cater to this very niche fan base. Let's start making episodes that are meant for our intended audience again. Yeah. And things actually balanced out, and the very toxic people went away because there's like, oh, the show's no longer catering to me anymore. It's like, yeah, that's the point. But that's an extreme example. But as for what fans can do to try to fix the communities, it's hard to say. I think Alex kind of put it best, where sometimes you just have to go elsewhere and find other communities that are a bit more civil.
Or start your own. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Either start your own or go somewhere a bit more civil. Because honestly, when things get really toxic on specific forums, it's really, really hard to fix an existing forum. It's usually better to make kind of a clean break and start somewhere fresh. I mean, I've seen it happen through DeviantArt, through Tumblr. It's a tough thing. But I guess the simplest way, and I think it's something for anyone who's a fan of these properties that wants to get people into it, it's to kind of quote the mantra from MST3K, it's just a show. It's just a show.
Well, and it's interesting that we brought up the idea of like go off and either join a smaller community, the one that kind of prescribes to your values, or start it up. Because basically what you're saying is that we should have smaller knit communities compared to this big, huge, toxic machine that is right there. And I tend to agree with that. I tend to kind of stick with my own personal circle of friends of, World of Warcraft stuff or any particular community online that I want to follow. A lot of them are small communities. I want to say like at most they don't get beyond 30 to 50 people. And at that point, I think it's manageable. Like, and I'm not even the guy who's running it at that point. Like I got invited to join this WoW forum and just discuss stuff kind of thing. And I think if you keep it as small as you possibly can, then you guys can at least all come together and enjoy this fandom and even get some lasting friendships out of the matter too. At least in my opinion. Do you think the communities could get bigger than that? But like, according to the idea, like, is it better to just start a brand spanking community on your own and have kind of a close-knit group of friends celebrating the fandom of League of Legends?
Well, it's tough to say. That just may be the better approach to go, depending on the platform that you're discussing it on. So, like, if it's like a niche forum on a website to use, I don't know if it's still around, because I used to be on Gaia Online when I was a teenager. That was kind of like a nerdy version of MySpace where you had your little anime avatar, and they had different forums to discuss different things on the website. And so a lot of it really depends on whether you're on whether you're on like a niche website with a lot of those fan forums like that, or if it's simply a page on Tumblr, or if you're talking with someone on Twitter. There's no real easy answer, because on one case where you have like forums, it's a case of, okay, well, you can probably jump to a different forum or maybe find a different section of the forum that's a little bit more friendly. But if it's on something like, say, Facebook or Twitter, which is a little bit more ubiquitous, it's a little bit harder to get away from the more vitriolic parts of the fandom, especially once they smell blood in the water and are coming after you.
Yeah, or they're just looking for straight attention.
Which, if they're looking for straight attention, well, as we've often said, don't feed the trolls and they'll eventually go away.
Yeah, pretty much. Alex, your take on that? Like, is it just better to create these smaller, more tight-knit communities than to be part of like these big, these big machine kind of fandoms? Or
really, just I think is going to depend on your needs. For me, being a fairly shy, introverted person, then I'd say the smaller is the way to go for a person like me. If you have a personality,
that's probably a little bit more intimate for you, kind of thing.
Yeah,
like you can be more open there.
As somebody who is part of a very small little fan community forum, yes, it's very intimate. It's very personal. We all know each other. We all really respect each other. We can talk very freely and openly with each other, right? But I'm also in some of the bigger communities like MartAnimE list, and I talk to people there sometimes. And it's you got to go where your needs are suited, and to see really how bad or how anything it is. Is it widespread? Is it just okay? Maybe little subsections of little bits of people that you can not bother with. Just you gotta look at where your needs are, and go with where it best suits you.
But what I think is actually kind of interesting that we all are kind of leaning towards is like, if the community is toxic, don't stay there. Like, especially if that's not to your best interests. Like I've known a few people in my life that feel like they have no other option because that's the only place where you can go to get that commentary. And then, I talked to them, a year down the line, and they found a better community to be able to do that. But I mean, we're talking 6 months where they took torrents of abuse in these forums or in these official game dev areas. And in some cases, like, yeah, you need to have a bit of a thicker skin when it comes to stuff like this, but you also have people just throwing out stuff that you would never even dare say to your mother, much less your grandmother, simply because you couldn't remember that Keith wore red instead of purple or instead of black on Voltron, kind of thing. That's the part that makes me the most sad, is that as geeks, as gamers, as Star Trek fans, as Star Wars fans, we are so divided now, when in reality we should be coming together for our beloved fandoms and enjoying in the fandom, not necessarily whether or not this particular character doesn't prescribe to your particular beliefs. It's just that this character exists in this environment and it works, kind of thing. That's another thing that I like. If you're going to try and fix, heaven forbid, if you were going to try and fix the community from within, I would say you got to follow the golden rule. You got to treat people as you want to be treated. And if you get the torrents of abuse, you don't deal with that person ever again. You report them, you do all that stuff, and you move on with your life. And I would also say that, if it's going to be a community that's like completely based on the fandom, it needs to stay that way. Okay. Like, I get that a lot of people have their life stories on how Star Trek changed their lives or whatever, but one of the problems that we're having in a lot of these communities that makes them toxic is the fact that real life events are starting to make their way into them. And therefore it's no longer about that fandom. It's about how this culture needs to adapt to this. And even though it's not even technically relevant for it to be able to do that.
Yeah, and that's not even getting into like the weird times where real world companies will try catering to said fandoms, as we saw with the very poorly thought out Szechuan sauce incident to try to pander to the Rick and Morty fan base, leading to, well, people being absolute dumbasses.
Well, and I would actually dare say, like, Magic the Gathering right now is littered with bad decisions. And part of those decisions is that what started out being a fandom for a card game has now become, oh, how can this card game be affected by real life? The only thing that this card game should be affected by is when a new expansion comes out, new art for it, all that stuff. Real life events, they shouldn't really go into it that much. Okay, like this is simply a fandom, and we should all be able to come together and go, this is, like the Yu-Gi-Oh community should come together and say how awesome the Dark Magician is, not necessarily whether or not why he's not wielding a blue staff instead of a green. Okay, or having the debate about Sonic's leg length or eye color or all that stuff, because like that's stupid stuff to complain about when you have a fandom that has so many around it that love it.
Well, yeah, and there's even cases where you can have discussions like that and have it be in a fun, civil way.
Yes.
Like, for example, discussing Sonic's leg length, thinking, okay, how would it affect his running if he was a real creature? Or a good example with Dark Magician's like, okay, is Dark Magician actually a good card to have in a deck in this day and age, given the level of power creep?
Yeah, but here's the thing. A lot of the ways that you actually did that, Romney, are kind of what I'm saying here. You keep them within the context. And that's the problem that we're having right now is a lot of these issues are blasting out of the context and are blasting out of the fandom and are becoming like real life things. And I hate to tell you this, guys, but it's a card game. It doesn't really affect real life, and real life shouldn't affect it. This is simply an escape. This is something that you play or you get immersed in to kind of like this podcast. You listen to this podcast to get away from the everyday bullcrap kind of thing. And that's the way that I keep it. And I guess we have to answer this question. If the community is just toxic enough, like, can it be saved? Can it even be saved? Should you just disconnect completely?
Oh,
and I'm not talking like just disconnect and go start your own community. I'm saying like you shouldn't, because this is another question that we've gotten on the matter is like, should you just stop buying the product? Should you just stop supporting it? And until this element goes away.
Stop buying the product, I think, is a little extreme, especially if you enjoy it. If you don't enjoy it because maybe you think it is too much towards the opposite end of what you value in it, then sure. But if you still enjoy it, but you just don't like the people around it, you should keep enjoying it. This, like I said, I've made the mistakes in the past of getting too deep and too much, basing too much of myself on these things, and having to kind of come out of that learning some hard lessons and looking back on in hindsight and say, boy, that really was not worth all the bullshit I put myself through with that. I should have walked away a lot sooner. Hindsight's always 20/20. And that's, if a community's too toxic, but you still enjoy the product, disconnect from the community, and eventually either it'll correct itself or it can just go on its merry way, and you don't have to let it get you down. You can keep enjoying what you want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of the approach I take with things, where I enjoy the thing. Even if the people are toxic, I don't bother with the people. If the people are great. But it's kind of, I try not to let the fan community affect the things that I actually like. That's kind of one of the reasons, and especially now as we have YouTube channels and blogs dedicated to the kind of madness fan communities can put out. I mean, that was actually one of the reasons why I stopped following any of MatPat's channels, was because that's more or less what it was becoming, was random zeitgeist fan theory that's not going to be even remotely correct, yet people are going to go crazy over. Whereas in case of, I just want to watch the movies for the sake of watching the movies. I'm not going to waste brain space with these weird theories that no one actually really thinks about or cares about.
Yeah. And I guess the last thing that we can actually go on, because this is an actual question that did get brought up. This guy brought his girlfriend into it and completely regretted it. And at that point, he came to the solution of, do we just not do that? Do we just not get them in? Like, if your girlfriend, if you're, heaven forbid, your wife, your kids, your husband, if they want to get involved to this stuff, do we just encourage them not to? Do we just do we encourage them to just sit back and play with us? I think it's kind of a touchy situation. I think when there's kids involved, probably you want to kind of control that a little bit and make sure that they're going into an environment that's safe. But when it comes to like a girlfriend, where I'm assuming off that they're adults, can you stop them from having to deal with that toxic community? No, not really. You might encourage them not to, because especially if you know the community is toxic. You might encourage them not to.
Yeah, and it's very tricky, especially when you're trying to bring someone into something that is very multiplayer focused, like PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds.
Yeah.
I mean, with something like an anime series, a novel series, or even a movie series, that's something you can enjoy in isolation. But when you're dealing with something that has online competitive play as a key component, that's where things can get tricky, because, well, if the players who are also playing this very multiplayer-only game are, well, asshats, it's not going to really make you want to play it, and naturally people aren't going to want to buy it. That's honestly kind of the reason why I don't do a lot of online multiplayer with a lot of games, is for precisely that reason.
Yeah, and I'm kind of there too. Like, if I do online multiplayer, like say play with Mario Kart or, play like Dragon Ball Fighters, I would probably just stick to close friends and that'd be it. I know that's going to disappoint a lot of people because I do occasionally live stream from time to time. I'd be included on as long as you're going to be tasteful about it. Like if you wanted to actually engage with me on there, I'd have no issue with that. But the bottom line is that I would probably just stick with people I know and have fun with them, because that's primarily like why I'm coming on to go and do that stuff. Like I started playing WoW because my family was playing it, and then eventually I got a community of friends that I play with, kind of thing. I don't even care about like, because mainstream crap enters WoW all the time, and I just kind of sit there and go, well, then I'm just going to go ahead and keep my little corner of the sandbox and go do what I want to go do, because it's a big ass world and I can go and do what I want to go do, kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, when you go into something like Call of Duty, that's not necessarily the case. You're going to have to deal with that element. It's going to be there.
And I mean,
in fact, that's one of my big concerns now is that, so I don't know if you guys saw the news or not, but way back when Destiny 2 joined Battle.net, which is Blizzard's online app, Call of Duty has officially joined Battle.net now. So like Call of Duty Black Ops 4 is going to be on there. And a lot of me and my friends are like sitting there going, oh crap, now we have to deal with the COD people. It's like, yeah, this is a legit thing.
Yeah, and with some things like that, there are some things you can do. Like if a game like Call of Duty, sometimes it could be as simple as playing it on mute, not listening to the voice chat. But that can only go so far because, well, people still find ways to be dicks in game, and so it's a tricky thing. And so if you're someone who's a fan of something that has a vitriolic community and someone is showing interest, well, you'll have to be cautious and kind of use your better judgment because. Yeah.
Maybe like if you have one of these small communities, direct them there first and just let them get to know like the community that's around you instead. Like one of the things that me and Brinton have been bouncing back and forth since we're the ones that play WoW in this community is like, since Blizzard has decided to do what's basically communities, kind of like mini guilds, we actually like I've been bouncing the idea off of them of like, why don't we make like a geek news community within WoW? Because we have a lot of listeners that play WoW. So at that point, like we can make this little community for all of us to be able to get together and do dungeons together and all that stuff. That sounds amazing. If it ever became like super, 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 super huge, I think it would be kind of daunting at that point because you can't control every corner of it.
Well, yeah, and that's ultimately the problem when fandoms get as large as they have, especially in a very global community that we have now, is that you can't keep track of everyone. There are always going to be those bad apples that are either drumming things up for the purpose of attention or drumming things up because they have appointed themselves as some sort of ardent defender of the fandom, which there are a lot of people like that, which it's equally pathetic. I don't see the logic. I mean, I understand people identify
a lot of those people like want to be the proverbial white knight, and it just isn't the case.
Yeah, it's basically you don't really become the white knight. You're more like Monty Python's Black Knight. We've already cut off your arms and you're still fighting.
Jiggin! And the other
do, bleed on me?
What are you gonna do? Bleed on me? I'm invincible. You're a loony. And another example that I have here is like I know I've been giving a lot of examples here, but this is kind of the perfect one. We started up the Geek News Discord, and I'm glad that we have it, but there have been a lot of nights where I kind of sat there and went, can I go to bed? Because like I have to watch every corner of this thing like a hawk's to make sure that, that one troll doesn't get in and create all kinds of havoc for that one person who follows us, kind of thing. So it's definitely one of those things where I like having things small. And if they ever got big, it's like, that's a daunting task for me because I wouldn't want those situations happening to those who come to our community to be able to do that. So it's definitely something that just you have to pursue and based on your own judgment. And it's a day-to-day thing. Like you just kind of have to manage things as we go along. But yeah, I think that's the most that we can actually get an answer out of. If you guys like the geeky discussions that we're now going to be having, feel free to leave those suggestions for topics at our email, which is geekyweek@gmail.com. And you guys will be able to see these in. Like I said, this is a listener request for a discussion. We're planning on being able to do a lot more of these. Maybe some of them will have a little bit more of an agenda with us, but we would love to be able to get discussion topics from you guys, like concerns that you guys have as geeks of this particular fandom, or how this particular microtransaction or whatever affects how you do things online. That's kind of the purpose of it. And so final thoughts on it before we move on. I think we've pretty much hit the nail on the head. Like, this is the stuff that you can do to be able to figure it out.
Yeah, and even then, it's still a case, as we even pointed out, it's not an easy issue that can be resolved overnight. It basically takes time, it takes effort, and sometimes you have to ask yourself if it's worth either one of those.
Yep. So let's go ahead and get into the one topic that I think had the most listener requests this week. I was kind of hoping we could avoid it because I knew that the internet was going nuts about it. But no, we're officially talking about Thundercats Roar.
Yep. So we're feeling the magic and we're feeling the roar.
So it's official. The Thundercats are making their return to Cartoon Network. Now, if you don't remember this, way back in, I think it was 2012. 2012 was when the rebooted series launched.
I think it was 2011.
2011.
Yeah, 2011.
2011. So 2011, they launched a Thundercat series that was a little bit more anime inspired than the original. And since Cartoon Network had the rights, they tried to do that. But long story short, it lasted a season and was canceled. And part of that, there's some discussion online about, who's actually at fault here. Was it the fans? Was it Cartoon Network? Was it this? Was it that? There's a lot of contributing factors as to why that Thundercat season failed. I personally don't think it should have. I think they actually did a lot of really innovative ideas that should have at least lasted to the next season and been able to get some resolution for them. But that didn't happen. Cartoon Network has since decided to bring back the Thundercats, but in more of a Teen Titans Go fashion. So now we're going to be getting this new series, Thundercats Roar, which is roughly, as I've said, it's Teen Titans Go, but with Thundercats.
Honestly, every Cartoon Network show in existence right now with Thundercats.
Yeah, yes. Honestly, it bugs me that they call it Thundercats Roar when really the title writes itself. Thundercats Ho. I mean, what? Yeah. Why? I mean, honestly, it would at least make sense. Thundercats Roar is just so clunky and awkward.
Yeah, doesn't really make sense. But the studio behind it... Oh crap! Where is it? We've got Warner Brothers Animation bringing back the iconic cat-like aliens, but do we know the official studio?
I don't know the studio. I think it is being produced by Cartoon Network specifically, but
yeah,
doesn't list anything.
I know there's some.
Yeah.
I know there's.
So it says Warner Brothers Entertainment, so it's Warner Brothers Animation that's doing it.
Okay, so Warner Brothers Animation's doing it. Are they the ones that do Teen Titans Go as well?
Yep.
Okay, so that's why they're going with this direction. I know a few people were actually having a discussion of, was it the same people as that did Gumball on Cartoon Network? Because the animation, I guess, looks kind of similar. I don't know. I've seen like 1 or 2 episodes of Gumball, so I can't even compare that. It looks a lot like something that would come from the Teen Titans Go people.
I mean, everybody's kind of, I don't know how accurate it is, but everybody's kind of dubbing it the Cal Arts style because apparently this is what Cal Arts Institute is teaching its students now.
Well, that's a bit of a misnomer, though, because the term Cal Arts style has been thrown around a lot. The actual term Cal Arts style was thrown around initially by John Kay. And it was basically, and for those of you who don't know, John Kay, the creator of Ren and Stimpy. And so basically, and when he threw that out there, that was basically his way of bashing animated series that he didn't like. And that hasn't really changed because I have friends who actually go to Cal Arts. And the whole notion of, oh, this is the Cal Arts style, not exactly correct. I mean, a better way to look at it is that this is more the newer style that is just well, cost-effective, easier to animate. It's kind of the hybrid of Steven Universe, Adventure Time, and various other shows because, well, those simplified blobby designs are much easier to animate, which means by easier, they're also cheaper to animate. Because that's kind of what killed the 2011 reboot was that, yeah, it looked impressive, but complex characters are a real pain in the ass to animate, whether you're doing it on a computer or doing ink and paper. And so there was a video.
And if you don't have the audience, it ain't worth it.
Exactly. And there was a video that discussed this that actually explained it in a really good way, where the 2011 reboot ran into the same problems that the He-Man reboot ran into, where it was too niche. It wasn't hitting a mainstream audience, and it's the mainstream audience that's going to buy the toys. And, well, it wasn't hitting the successes, so they canceled it.
And one of the things also that kind of killed this was, I know that like a lot of the mainstream toy retailers, they got some that were able to be sold in their stores, especially when it came to the outreaches, like the coasts got them. But like when you got to like the Midwest, then things started becoming in short supply. I even remember like some of the smaller toy retailers around us that tried to get them and never, ever got the Thundercats toys so that they could sell them, because they literally looked at that and went, well, this is new. This is popular. Let's do it. Let's get this in our hands so that, you know, kids can buy the toys and get invested. The other thing too that also kind of killed that series was it kept on bouncing from time slot to time slot to time slot.
Yeah.
And that killed it too.
Yeah.
That usually never could keep up with it. Jeez.
Yeah, and that also usually happens when a network doesn't have faith in a property. I mean, when you look at what happened with The Legend of Korra and how it kept getting changed from time slot to time slot, how they kept telling with every single season, oh, hey, we're going to cancel it at the end of the season. And then they're just like, okay, well, let's wrap up the story. Oh, guess what? You're renewed. That's why it had so many writing problems, was because the people kept getting told that each season was going to be its last. And so it's a lot of factors. And honestly, looking at it here, I see this more as an effort by Cartoon Network to try to basically offset the complaint that all they show is Teen Titans Go, which is not an exaggeration.
So now they're going to show Thundercats Go.
It's true. Exactly.
Yeah, it's
all
true,
they do is show Teen Titans Go. Every time I turn on Cartoon Network, it's just Teen Titans Go for 20 hours.
Well, yeah, because I had a trial.
Not entirely, Alex. There are times when they show regular show on for like 2 hours.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's the weird thing is that I remember I had a trial for PlayStation View. I pulled up the program guide, looked at Cartoon Network's block, and I look at it and I'm just like, holy crap, Teen Titans Go as far as the eye can see.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of a case of, this is kind of where we are with an industry, is that they're taking something that people have a vague understanding of, that, oh, well, this is something that existed. And it's, honestly, of all the things to satirize, Thundercats is just an odd choice, because even back in the day, it wasn't like the major mainstream success people think it was.
No, it wasn't. No, it was very niche. And in fact, one of the things that surprises me to this day is I'm a Thundercats fan. I didn't even know it was made by Rankin Bass as a kid. So like all those Christmas specials you've watched, especially on like Freeform now, same company made Thundercats. That's how amazing that is.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's like the Hanna-Barbera animated Ultraman series that was around in the 80s as well, which was also weird because it was Hanna-Barbera, Flintstones, Yogi Bear doing a serious take on Ultraman.
But I actually kind of want to bounce back to the accusation that we're making of Cartoon Network. It's like it's endless marathons of blank, 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 you know? Because here's the thing. Before it was Teen Titans Go, guys, you know it was Adventure Time. Adventure Time was the one that was being marathoned all freaking day. And I'm almost kind of becoming of the opinion of like, marathons are great in small implements. But I get it. These cable channels have to put out a schedule. And it's easy enough to go into stuff that needs to be in some level of what's the word I'm looking for? You're constantly watching it. So like, you know, you need to go like the Nick at Night formula, where you eventually have stuff that is popular, that's in syndication, that you have to go to your syndication to kind of fill out your time slots. But is it happening so much now that cable channels are just getting freaking lazy?
Yeah, I mean, the other thing to consider is that with channels like Cartoon Network, which are basically meant to be kids-centric all the time except for Saturday nights, there's a lot of dead air during the day since most kids are usually at school and aren't really watching. And so it's kind of the case of that. That's probably part of the reason why they fill it up with Teen Titans Go is because, oh, well, this is the slot of time where most kids are at school and aren't going to be watching the show unless they're sick. And so, yeah, I mean, it is partial laziness, but it's also just
because as soon as because I think they've got one more season of Steven Universe and then they're done. Right before that season launches, you're going to get a marathon of freaking Steven Universe all day to help launch that brand to make a new episode. When Thundercats Roar happens, and we get like 5 episodes, they're going to start marathoning that stuff and just recycling the 5 episodes.
And honestly, I think it speaks to a larger systemic problem, and that is just the case that cable TV is dying. And I don't mean this in like, oh, it's only crap shows. Like, no, the way we consume media is changing. That's why on the cable networks that are trying to stay relevant, they put up stuff that's easy to animate and easy to write, like Teen Titans Go and Thundercats Roar. Whereas if you look over at Netflix, you get high-quality renditions of Voltron and soon She-Ra, because that's a case of, hey, we're going to make limited episodes that are meant to be watched in one sitting. Yeah. We don't have time slots to fill, so we're going to make what we're showing as good as possible most of the time. And so that's honestly, I think that's the bigger problem people aren't really seeing here, is that cable is struggling to stay relevant in a age that is becoming more digital and becoming more about being on demand and on our own terms, as opposed to tuning into a channel at a set time.
Yeah. Now, we'll actually get it before people start complaining. We'll get into the actual series itself and whether or not it would actually work. Now, the animators have actually made quotes in the story that we're actually working with from Entertainment Weekly. And let's go ahead and read some of those quotes to see if they could justify what they're doing with Thundercats Roar. I think the world that they built lends itself really well to comedy because of how silly and crazy and outlandish those ideas are and some of those settings are. This is from Victor Courtwright in the exclusive behind the scenes video that they showed. But at the same time, it wouldn't be Thundercats if it didn't have super cool action elements, because that's what people came back to. It's very much something that we want to lean on. So with the new show, we're not walking away from the action in any bit. Every step we take towards comedy, we take 2 more towards cool action scenes and explosions and lasers and action effects. Okay? Here's my issue with the statement that you're making. Okay? So give me a quick second here to bring this up. Give me you guys will see, or I'll try and put the image up so you guys can check it out on the RSS feed. But when you look at this image, do you really want to see action-y scenes from these animated models?
No.
I would dare make the argument, no, you don't. You want to see comedy come out of these things, because that's how Teen Titans Go works as well. Okay, you have and before people jump down my throat, yes, Teen Titans Go has action scenes, and they actually try to stay at least somewhat relevant to the DC universe. I mean, they've had like the Young Justice kids show up on Teen Titans Go. But the problem is, what are the most popular episodes of Teen Titans Go? They're the silly, outlandish plots. They're the ones that don't make any lick of sense. And it's hilarious to the kids, and therefore it's Looney Tunes, people. There's a reason Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner worked as long as it did. Because it was just, what is Wile E. Coyote going to pull out of his ass to try and get the Roadrunner? Okay, that's how that works. And I'm sorry, but I don't believe your statement when I'm thinking, because you eventually are going to look at that formula and go, no, the kids aren't wanting the action scenes. The kids are wanting the comedic stuff. Gee, I wonder why, because the models look like that.
Yeah, and another thing to consider, and it's something that I've noticed with people who try to do action comedy, is that part of what makes action, what gets people invested in action, is the stakes. And when you basically have character models that don't look solid, that don't even look like they'll have consistent proportions, when you see them get hurt, you're not going to be invested because they don't look solid. They're just weird, blobby, noodly people that can probably bounce off a wall if you throw them hard enough and be perfectly fine, as opposed to, well, and I get the best way to look at it is if you look at a Jackie Chan film. part of what Jackie Chan's action makes Jackie Chan's action comedy work is the fact that, hey, there's actual pain. The characters actually react to what is being done to them. And you don't really get that with more comedic shows like this because they don't understand you have to actually have the audience invested in the story in order for the action to actually get their attention.
Yes.
If it's just mindless comedy out of the gate, people aren't going to care.
Look, the bottom line is that there's an art style for action, and then there's an art style for comedy. And this style accommodates more to comedy than it does to action. And I would actually dare say, at least in my opinion, Thundercats does not lend itself to comedy. Yes, it has comedic elements. I mean, the 2011 series certainly did, but it's mostly lending itself to an action-y kind of environment. If you were going to resurrect something that was more comedic, you'd probably go something along the lines of, I don't know, Ninja Turtles kind of lends itself to a more comedic element. Bucky O'Hare lends itself to a little bit more of a comedic element. Am I saying that you couldn't do action with those? Obviously you could. Those shows did that.
And even if you wanted to do comedy, you could do a satirical send-up to Thundercats. Promise, we already have it. It's called Robot Chicken. Like the Robot Chicken sketches do it the way you're supposed to, where you actually take a look and break down the components of the original work and poke fun at it. This is something even Looney Tunes understands to a pretty good extent with some of the newer shorts they had done. Even Disney's starting to understand this with the newer Mickey Mouse shorts, where it's a case of, hey, let's actually take a look at these components and actually find a way to twist them for the purpose of comedy, rather than slapping a generic slapstick segment with a new skin.
Or they're starting to realize that these models that they've held for so long don't necessarily lend themselves to more serious stuff. Like, I don't know if you've lent your opinion on this one, Romney, but a lot of people have been, including myself, have been complaining about the updated models in Kingdom Hearts with Mickey, basically saying that, now they're starting to see the flaws or the chinks in the armor. You can't necessarily make this model work and be serious, like not 100% serious. It doesn't lend itself to that.
Yeah.
And so you start to have that problem.
Yeah, and then the other thing to consider is that, again, there's a right way and a wrong way to do satire, and that's why, again, with that quote there, it's like they're trying to have their cake and eat it too, where they're trying to we're going to be doing it comedic, but then also having serious action. You can't really have both.
I can already guarantee you 5 episodes in, that mission statement's going to go out the freaking window, because you're going to realize the problem that you walked yourself into. And that is that this lends itself more to comedy. And you're going to have to do that. And therefore, you're going to piss off the people who wanted a serious Thundercat series.
Well, yeah. And one series that a lot of people who've been defending the show keep trying to bring up is Space Ghost Coast to Coast. But here's the thing. Space Ghost Coast to Coast uses the limitations of what they're doing. They use if they wanted to do a Space Ghost Coast to Coast, they wouldn't be doing these weird noodly designs. They would just be rehashing literally old frames from the old Thundercats show for comedic effect. They'd basically be doing what Team 4-Star's been doing for more than 10 years, and that would be how you would get comedy in that Space Ghost regard, because that's what Space Ghost did. They took the old animations from the original Space Ghost cartoons and repurposed them for comedic effect.
Yeah, don't bring up the 15-minute cartoons, guys. The 15-minute cartoons are horrible examples, because, like, Space Ghost, if you're bringing that up, 80% of its stuff is recycled. 80% of it is recycled frames from old Space Ghost cartoons where they literally just took the model out and put it into a talk show environment. And that's fine.
The joke.
And that's exactly the joke. And I mean, it's not like you ever had a live guest there, right? You had a TV of a dude that was sitting in a darkened room, and 80% of the entertainment factor was taking these models and making them do stupid ass things when they were supposed to be all serious in Space Ghost. Okay. There's a reason that Harvey Birdman didn't eventually adopt this. They had to adapt their actual own frames. C-Lab, that's a different deal. They still recycled a lot of stuff, but they also made a lot of new stuff too in that one. So those are not even good. Those aren't even remote examples toward this is actually doing. This is basically taking a serious series and nuking it down to Looney Tunes quality. They are literally dumbing it down. Alex, you've been kind of quiet on this matter. What's your take on Thundercats Roar, man?
Well, I never grew up with the original 80s Thundercats, and I tried to get into the 2011 series. I really liked the first episode when I saw it. The only problem was it was always seemed to be at like really inconvenient times.
Yeah.
Because obviously I was in school. I was in college then, so a lot of early morning classes, couldn't really, keep bouncing around with time slots. Had to go to bed at various times to make sure I'd be up for school in time. So, it's disappointing, really. I mean, I was disappointed that the anime series never took off. And the fact that we keep kind of getting the same recycled schlock all the time on Cartoon Network. It's pretty much the mid to late 2000s when Cartoon Network kind of fell into its slump and then got recovered. But now we seem to be back in a slump because all they want to do is chase the Teen Titans Go or the Adventure Time money and not seem to do anything else. And we keep getting the same looking animation cartoons all the time, with the same 5 prearranged keyframes. It's really just, this is why I'm not interested in American cartoons as much anymore, because it just seems also samey.
I'm glad you brought that up, because that was another problem that I had. Is I looked at the new Lino model that they have, and then I looked up Steven Universe. And I literally looked at them for like 5 seconds. I'm like, this is the same freaking model. The only difference is Steven is a little bit pudgier.
Yeah, and this raises another issue, and it's something that another video I saw that pointed out, is that it's not so much people are like copying it for the sake of, oh, we're going to make it. It's more they're copying the aesthetic of Steven Universe without actually understanding Rebecca Sugar's mindset when designing the characters of Steven Universe. Which, by the way, to the people who call it CalArts style, Rebecca Sugar didn't go to CalArts, so that you can throw that assertion out the window.
No, and I'm not necessarily knocking it. I would actually say there's a lot of difference between Steven Universe and Teen Titans Go and Thundercats Roar.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying a lot of the models look very similar, and there's a psychological reason to that, people.
Yeah, and the point that I'm making is that you basically have other studios and other animation houses copying Steven Universe because it's popular, but not actually taking time to understand why that style works for Steven Universe. I mean, look no further than the Powerpuff Girls reboot, where the background characters look like they're drawn by different artists. It's because they're taking a style and trying to emulate it without actually taking the time to think of, okay, why was the character designed this way? What about the style actually works? It's the same thing we saw with Warner Brothers trying to copy Disney with their crappy animated version of The King and I. They saw Disney animation, tried to copy it, but they didn't actually take time to analyze and see why it worked before they tried to do it.
Exactly. So, I mean, final verdict on Thundercats Roar. I can already tell you guys, because I cannot begin to tell you how many times I got asked this. Are you going to watch it? I'm going to tell you, no. I'm not watching it, and it's simply because I don't really even watch cable anymore. I've occasionally come across it because my wife's watching something on cable. So already that was going against it. But I mean, if you asked me what I wanted, I'd want season 2 of the 2011 series. That's what I want. Not necessarily this. That's not what I want, so I'm probably not going to watch it. Alex, what about you?
No, I'm not going to watch it either, because I'm really sick of this art style, and I hate the weird, goofy, rounded edges of everything. It's just, I just can't do it. I'm sure it's going to play out exactly like Teen Titans Go. It's going to have the same jokes, the same humor, and it's just all so samey and so dull.
Well, it's going to have the same jokes, but they'll be alien.
Yeah. There was a great analogy I heard from a Norwegian. That's it. Norwegian commentator about this, and that is, it's like he was always taken aback. Like, this is like such a typical American thing where you have, and this isn't like a knock on America. Just like, this is like such an American thing. You have like
no, he's right on this one.
20 different kind. It's like going to the grocery store. You see 20 different kinds of barbecue potato chips. Why do you need 20? Why do Americans need 20 different kinds of the same chip?
I mean, he's not wrong.
Yeah, he's not wrong. I'm totally screwing up his analogy there. I'm totally butchering how he actually put it, but it's just a perfect analogy, I think.
The problem is that with one specific comedy series, you've got about 10 different flavors of it now. The same joke is getting pulled off, and guys, go watch a lot of these series, and I can tell you that they're doing the same jokes. Steven Universe has done the same joke a number of times that Adventure Time has, regular show has, Gumball probably has. I'm guaranteeing SpongeBob's done it. I'm guaranteeing Fairly Odd Parents did it back when it was popular. Like this is crap that happens. And granted, you got to do jokes that are representative of present culture because that's what's going to sell. But at the same time, when you're doing the exact same joke over and over, the joke just starts to get stale. Especially if you're an animation fan, you try to support your favorite creators. You know, it's one of those things where I'm proud to be an animation, like a supporter of animation. And I love when rare stuff, like, you know, for crying out loud, I love Butch Hartman. And for the reasons that a lot of people don't think, it's because after waiting for so long of seeing the stupidness of Fairly Odd Parents, that I eventually got the awesomeness that was Danny Phantom. Okay. That's what happened there. If you stick with animators a long time, they'll eventually do something that you're going to be absolutely awesome about. I loved Avatar and moved on to Korra and loved that things got more serious. And if you'd only see it on Netflix, you'd notice that their storytelling style has gotten tons better with Voltron. Okay. That's what happens when you stick with somebody long enough. And it's just unfortunate that right now the art style is just trying to be as dumb as possible that we can be for kids. A lot of people don't even realize, like, as dumb as we want to say Looney Tunes and Tom and Jerry are, some of them had really smart commentary in them.
Yeah, but that's really the other thing. People try to bring those up as examples, but what people forget is that with the old Looney Tunes and Tom and Jerry cartoons, they weren't designed just for kids. They were designed for a all ages audience in a movie theater, meaning you had to have stuff for the adults as well as the kids. And that's a lot of people think, oh, but what about Tom and Jerry? It's like, yeah, because it was meant for a wider audience than what cartoons are designed for now. The sad reality is that shows like Adventure Time, they're doing the exact same thing, people. It's just, unfortunately, the demographics are getting dumber. Yeah, and it's also a case where sometimes people try to aim for both, but don't understand how to do it properly. Because even Adventure Time had some missteps. I remember my older brother, when his niece was watching the Lich Saga on Adventure Time, she was straight up terrified. And he looked at it and he's just like, why did they think this idea would work for a younger audience that they would obviously be aiming for? And that's the other problem, is that if you're going to aim for all audiences, you kind of have to keep things subdued and keep things balanced. Otherwise, you're either going to bore your adult viewers or you're going to straight up terrify your younger viewers.
Yeah, or confuse them. And at that point, that's kind of what you want to avoid. You want them to be part of the whimsy. Like, as much as people have complimented Steven Universe to me, I've seen a few episodes that I'm just like sitting there going, how on earth do your kids not come to you and ask questions? Because there's no way that they're possibly going to understand that.
Yeah.
And that in some cases turns them off to aspects of that. There's a reason that series like Animaniacs had to cater to adults as well as kids. And the ways that they did that was, some jokes were just funny all around. And then eventually when you got 20 years older, they were even funnier because you realized, oh yeah, they were trying to get this past the censor.
Well, yeah, even to use a more recent example, the PBS show Word Girl actually has a lot of jokes that are put in for the adults as well. They're not nearly as sneaky as you would see on a cable network. But if shows like Word Girl can actually make that humor work for both adults and kids, it can work. I mean, with Word Girl, they specifically do it in terms of wordplay, which, again, makes sense. It's a show about vocabulary, but they find a way to make it work. My older sister is a fan of both Word Girl and Archer, and they have a lot of the same voice actors and a lot of the same writers, because there is a way to strike that balance. You just actually have to make an effort.
Yep. So I think we pretty much hit the nail on the head here. It's like Thundercats Roar is, the sad reality here is, I think we all think that this is going to be somewhat popular. This is going to hit that nail on the head for a little while, and then people are going to get bored.
Well, yeah, and honestly, the point I was making at the top is that of all the things to give this treatment, Thundercats is the strangest choice because, again, it's not as big as people think it actually was. It only became
I would actually dare say, considering all the memes, He-Man would make better sense right now than Thundercats.
Yeah, like He-Man, or I guess since Filmation like DreamWorks got the rights to that. But yeah, like He-Man would be a better choice. I mean, I'm even sure. I mean, Captain Planet would be a better choice to satirize this style.
Oh, jeez. Yeah, that actually would work perfectly right now.
Yeah, and especially like in today's climate, like doing this, like Captain Planet, you could give this treatment to because Captain Planet has a lot of aspects about it that you could make fun of and get a lot of good comedy out of. And yeah, and so it's just the fact that they're doing it with Thundercats is just such a strange decision.
Yeah, it really is. Okay, moving on into the last story that we have, which is kind of a two-pronged one. This is kind of reporting in on stuff that we already knew about, but we got some more Star Wars news. So it's apparently been announced, at least a rumor has come out, that another Star Wars story, for lack of a better term, because it looks like all of the side stories that Lucasfilm right now wants to do are always going to have Star Wars story attached to them. One of the ones they're looking into is one based off of Obi-Wan Kenobi. So there's a rumored movie that's supposed to be happening, and before people start getting excited about, oh my gosh, this is going to go into an origin story for Obi-Wan, and we're going to see like some of the stuff that he did before he became a Jedi. Nope. According to the rumor, and reports that we have, this is basically a direct prequel to A New Hope. Okay, so this would be a film completely based on Tatooine, where Obi-Wan is collecting himself and training to become, a ghost in the Force and all that stuff, all the stuff that we already know he did in between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope. Maybe when he actually deals with sand people and their interactions, maybe when he goes off to watch a young Luke as he grows up. That's what this is basically catering to. And this is the story that they're looking to they're looking to tell. Now, before people start getting amazingly excited about this, there are a couple things that we need to clear up. One, there's no confirmation saying Ewan McGregor is part of it. Okay? So I've seen a lot of people just screaming out, well, if it's got Ewan in it, I'd see it. It's not confirmed. This movie, to my knowledge, has no director. It has no writer. It has no producer. This is simply something that they decided to make a bunch of spaghetti and threw it at the wall and saw what stuck. Okay? That's what this is. So before we all immediately jump down on it and say it's a bad idea, or we jump up on it and say it's amazing, this is what it is. So with that premise being in mind, let's get into our opinions on this. Is this a movie that could work? I'm going to be honest. I don't think so.
I don't know. Yeah. I think it's possible. I mean, it's too soon to say because it's rumor. We don't even have so much as even a potential story treatment, plot pitch, anything. Exactly. So it's way too soon to really say for sure. There could be some interesting scenarios that could be born out of this. We could see, okay, how does Obi-Wan kind of keep an eye on a young Luke Skywalker, which would be a little tricky to do because you'd have to probably find either an actor to kind of fill the shoes of a very young Luke Skywalker. Probably wouldn't be more than a child. You could see, I don't know, wayward wayward Imperial hunters out to maybe try and sneak out Luke, because there's always that argument. It's like, why would Obi-Wan put Luke on Tatooine when that was Vader's homeworld? This would be the kind of movie to kind of maybe address those fan complaints a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, another thing that could also be raised, and it's something that was a missed opportunity with the prequels, because if you look at A New Hope, Uncle Owen is very dismissive of Obi-Wan and kind of writes him off as a wacko. And so it's a case of, hey, maybe explore what led Uncle Owen to think this about Obi-Wan. What led, were they maybe amicable at first upon dropping off Luke, or were things tense from the very beginning? That's a question that could also be answered with a story like this.
Well, considering what little we know of their relationship right now is discussions in A New Hope and the ending scene in Revenge of the Sith. Okay, this is what we have, which is when he dropped off Luke, they were amicable. Like they said, oh yeah, we'll raise the boy. But then something happened up and leading into A New Hope where Owen was really bitter. Okay, so that's pretty much all we have on the matter. Here's my concern on the matter, and here's why I don't know if this can actually work. Stuff has been done on this, and I'm not saying, look, guys, I'm not saying let's go make a Clone Wars plot and put it in a movie. Okay. I'm not saying that, because the bottom line is that worked for Clone Wars. This is where it's canon. This is where it's not a side story, and some of that shit don't work. Okay. But the problem is all of the stuff that is considered canon, where we have seen Obi-Wan in the desert, hasn't been all that interesting. And that's where I'm worried, is that we're going to get lots of stuff where it's just him living a very methodical life on Tatooine. Okay. Like, he occasionally deals with sand people. He occasionally deals with Uncle Owen. He occasionally I'd rather have like a full on arc that he's going through. But here's the cool part, is that Romney and Alex have kind of answered that. What if he was dealing with an internal struggle of preventing Vader from finding Luke? Not necessarily where he had like Imperial scouts like going out looking for him, but what if Vader was reaching out and having that internal struggle with Obi-Wan kind of thing, trying to find him?
Yeah, so I mean, another thing that could even be explored, and it's something the Clone Wars series somewhat touched upon, is, again, what was Obi-Wan doing during his time on Tatooine? He was training with Qui-Gon to learn how to basically become a Force ghost, because he knew that that would be an important thing. I mean, I've developed my own pitch for an Obi-Wan movie out of boredom, but the way I see it, I wouldn't do an Obi-Wan movie focused solely on Tatooine. I would use his time on Tatooine as a framing device, then go back to seeing Obi-Wan's early days as a Padawan, maybe even seeing kind of how he and Qui-Gon got on in those early days. And then you would use maybe, like, here's how I'd frame it. You'd have Obi-Wan in meditation. Maybe he's hearing Qui-Gon's voice, and him training under Qui-Gon kind of causes the two of them to reminisce about the past. And then, bam, you're whisked back to Coruscant, back when they were both younger Jedi, and you get to kind of see what they were like as master and apprentice.
Yeah, that's actually what I think would be more of a worthwhile thing, is that while he's training, while he's trying to prevent Luke being found and all that stuff, like, we have these memories, these retrospectives, these character studies into Obi-Wan himself, to be able to see like where he was at the beginning, where he was when he was journeying with Qui-Gon. And I think that actually would work if we did this as like a character study of Obi-Wan while he's training to learn to be a Force ghost. That would actually be a really cool premise. But what we know about it right now is not as cool as we're painting it out to be, people. It is like, it's prequel to A New Hope. We don't know anything about it. That's why we can do all of this stuff.
Yeah. Plus, that raises the question: a story like that would definitely be more philosophical. But does Lucasfilm, and by extension Disney, have enough faith in the property for them to make a Star Wars film that is inherently philosophical? In my opinion, that's the thing. I don't think they have that kind of faith.
Well, here's the thing. If you hire the right guy, you've got it. Okay? Because here's the thing that I'm going to compliment the creator of Clone Wars as well as Rebels, because he actually was able to do something like this with another Jedi, and it was really awesome. So for those who have seen the Netflix only series or season of Clone Wars, he actually was able to do a really cool character perspective on Yoda, as Yoda learned how to be able to be a Force ghost. And they went into that. And we also learned a little bit more about the introspective problems and decisions that Yoda's had to make to be able to survive the Clone Wars, as well as make sure that the Jedi survived, and ultimately how he realized it was all a mistake. Okay. So that's a really cool character study into that. So if you get, man, his name is escaping me right now. If you get him on it, I'm all for it. I think it'd be an amazing thing. Is this something that I want Rian Johnson to do? Not really. No. Not really, because he had okay, I'm not on the hate wagon of Last Jedi, but given the character development that he had working on, he didn't take the opportunity. He could have done so much more with it, and he was more interested in telling a casino plotline.
Yeah. I'm more interested in putting in comedy as well as undermining everything J.J. Abrams had set up. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, I wouldn't necessarily want J.J. Abrams to tell this kind of story, because he's not good at the kind of that more philosophical sort of story. But then there's also the case of, if they do get a director who's good at telling that sort of story, what's the guarantee that he's going to get along well with Kathleen Kennedy, the other key
that's the problem here. And the funny thing is, the more I learn about Kathleen Kennedy, the more I wonder if the naysayers are kind of right, if Star Wars is going to be spinning its wheels for a while, because Kathleen has an intended vision, and that vision is not necessarily what a lot of Star Wars fans would agree with. And she's only interested in telling the stories that she wants to tell. And at that point, those aren't the stories that Star Wars fans want to hear. And that's the problem. And so at that point, like, I literally combed my brain when I saw this Obi-Wan concept and went, okay, of the directors that Kathleen Kennedy approved of, not fired, approved of, could they do this character retrospective, this character study? No. JJ couldn't do it. I don't even think Phil Lord and Chris Miller could do it. I don't even know if Ron Howard can do it. And Ron Howard's done character study movies, guys. I don't know if he could do that, because a lot of his, like, the character study movies that he can bring up are based on real life events. And therefore there's a real person that you can interview. This is where you have to make it up out of your ass. And that's where that's where I think Ron Howard would falter, is he hasn't necessarily done that. And I don't know if they're willing to pay him the capital so that he can. So that's the issue that I think we're coming across. Alex, are we up our own butts? Do you not agree with what we're saying here?
It's definitely a concern. You got to find the right person. You got to find the right writer and find the right director who can make the movie happen, whether you try to be a philosophical movie or just try to tell a good story. I mean, it depends on what the route they do want to go, right? Because right now we're getting Solo, which looks like to be going more for the pulp adventure sort of style, right? But you have Rogue One, and you have apparently hate. Well, right. Well, we'll have to see what Ron Howard puts out as the final product, considering he essentially redid about 70% of the film, says final estimates here. So it looks like with Sully, we're getting the pulp adventure kind of movie. You had with Rogue One, kind of the more serious war drama movie. Somber. Yeah. So it's just sort of what is the tone that Disney's going to want. Right now, we don't know, because we don't have anything to go off of other than this thinly veiled rumor. I mean, we just barely got the supposed quote unquote confirmation that we were getting the Lando Calrissian movie. Then Kathleen Kennedy, of course, had to renege and say, no, I didn't mean we were actually getting it. She said this. It's like, no, we're not getting it. It's something I'd like to do, that's also but that's not what we're doing right now.
That's kind of Kathleen's problem too, is that she's not, when it comes to the hard questions that Star Wars fans want answered, she's not necessarily willing to answer those. But one of the things that actually kind of pissed me off with the Solo coverage is when we got interviews from the characters. So like an interview with Han and an interview with Chewie and all that, they didn't, or at least with the creators, you got more fluff questions than you got actual like character retrospective ones. And it's just like, so what that's telling me, especially from the writer's perspective, is maybe the writers have thought about it, but Kathleen has kind of gone to the opinion of like, we don't care about those answers. We want the fluff answers because that's what people care about. And I don't agree. Like, one of the things that drove me nuts is that, kind of going into Lando's personality, the first question that they ask the actor is, so what sexuality is he? I'm like, I get why you're asking that, but it's a character. You're not worried about that particular aspect of their lives. You know that he's a guy that you're not supposed to necessarily trust, but man, that smile is just so adorable. And that's what necessarily cares about it. I would have been more interested in, okay, how are you actually going to tell of Han getting the Falcon away from Lando? Kind of thing. Or how is Lando going to be a part of Han's life if the Falcon is stolen from him in a card game? You know, like, how are you going to continue that relationship so that we can eventually see his development in, say, Empire Strikes Back, where he becomes General Calrissian kind of thing? Like, you have a really great moment to be able to do a lot of character development. And given the interviews that you're doing right now, I don't see the, like, I'll have to see the movie to see if you actually put in any development.
Well, that's kind of the point. I don't think you're really not going to get that in a press junket. So they want you to go see the movie.
Yeah. I'm probably asking way too much, but that's just kind of my viewpoint on the matter. And then the final question on this one, and then we'll move on into the other one because we got to wrap things up. Do we actually see them doing this without Ewan, or do you have to bring Ewan in?
I'd say it's 50-50 at this point. It sounds like he's been interested. I don't know. That's just what I've heard.
He's been pretty gung-ho on the matter.
Yeah, he's interested. So frankly, I kind of don't see why not. I mean, if Rogue One is going to go to the painstaking trouble of doing digital recreations of long dead actors, or still at the time still living actors but younger, whatever you want to say about the CGI, my point, what I'm getting at is, if Rogue One wanted to go to that much trouble, then I would feel like, okay, I think they would want to go to the trouble of getting Ewan McGregor back, because it's like, okay, they clearly do care about how people see these original characters.
Yeah, as long as the story makes sense, then yeah, let's go to those lengths.
Yeah,
you know, I'll complain about it. You know, I'll say butter-faced Obi-Wan, but I'm not going to care because I got this really cool story segment out of it.
Yeah, I'm not saying that they would go and recreate like Alec Guinness's image digitally. I'm just saying, like, okay, but they went to the trouble of, you know, wanting to recreate Peter Cushing's image and a much younger Carrie Fisher. So clearly they like, you know, they care about what these characters look like to the extent as much as they can.
Yeah,
you know, but they wanted to try that. And again, your results will vary on that. Not everybody liked the digital effects, but I just think, like, you know, they probably would want to potentially court Ewan McGregor to come back and play Obi-Wan, especially if he is interested.
And it's especially in the concept of, I actually don't think that they would do anything involving Alec. I think there's enough youth that know at least Ewan. So at that point, they would basically try to show him graying up, but they're not going to do like this weird CG to try and fuse his face with Alec Guinness. I don't think they're even going to touch that, because there's no reason to.
Which is fine. I would rather just have them just have Ewan McGregor. And this is for me, the guy who has defended the CGI recreations of Tarkin and Leia, but I still would rather them just have the physical actor Ewan McGregor play Obi-Wan. He does. Yeah,
I'd rather have a gray. I'd rather have a gray-haired,
you know, Ewan McGregor. Because considering where it would probably be set in the timeline, you could still skirt it enough, and he already did very well trying to kind of bridge the gap of Alec Guinness from the prequels through the end of Revenge of the Sith. So he did a pretty bang-up job.
All right. And then the final story that we actually have, this is kind of a two-pronged Star Wars story, because not only did we get the rumored Obi-Wan movie, but another movie that has been on the docket for a while, but has been in development hell for a long time, has finally had some level of traction happen to it. And that is the Boba Fett movie. So if people remember, like, Rogue One was supposed to be the first side story. Then we were going to get episode 8, and then we were going to get Solo. Then after episode 9 was supposed to be this Boba Fett movie. But for the longest time, we had no director, we had no writer, we had no cast, we had nothing. Well, that's changed. We now have, and I'm not sure if it's rumor or if it's official fact. No, it is official fact. James Mangold is writing and directing the standalone movie centered on Boba Fett. So we have a writer/director on this one. I'm not thinking of his resume off the top of my head, so I'm going to be looking that up.
The most notable one is Logan, which most people immediately know him for. He's done genre work before, because he also directed the previous film, The Wolverine. He's also the man behind the Johnny Cash biopic Walk the Line, the Tom Cruise film Night and Day, and the remake of 3:10 to Yuma. So he's been around.
Yeah, he's actually been around on a number of things. He's an executive producer on The Greatest Showman. Let's see, directors alone. He's got Logan, the Wolverine, 3:10 to Yuma, Walk the Line. Yeah, you guys all mentioned that. Kate and Leopold. So this guy's got a reputation with Hugh Jackman. I can tell you that much. Girl Interrupted, Copland. Yeah, this guy's got a reputation to him, and let's see his writer credits really quick and see what he's written. Ford versus Ferrari. He wrote Logan, or he wrote the screenplay for it. He wrote Walk the Line, Kate and Leopold. So a lot of the stuff that he's worked on, he's directed. He's also written. Oh, he was actually a screenplay writer for Oliver and Company, so he's been working since the 80s. So yeah, I mean, is this a good choice or a bad choice for the Boba Fett movie? Considering he did Logan and he's kind of in that post-apocalyptic feel, that's probably the mindset you need to be in to do Boba Fett.
Well, yeah, like both post-apocalyptic and Western, given that he's got experience in both. I mean, you basically have the makings of a space Western with a character like Boba Fett.
Yeah. And especially considering what Boba actually has to deal with, like, unfortunately, you can't show a lot of the history that the expanded universe has done. So at that point, you have to show how he eventually became a very successful bounty hunter, how he got into good graces with Jabba the Hutt, and eventually got put on the Han Solo job, kind of thing. So this is probably the guy that they would want to be able to do it. Somebody who could write Westerns, who could write post-apocalyptic and write a very dark story, considering that Boba Fett's story can't be candy and rainbows. It's got to be pretty dark.
Well, yeah, and especially considering that James Mangold was nominated for an Oscar for his work on Logan, specifically for Best Adapted Screenplay. Yep. It's a case of that they also have the awards clout that they're bringing to the table as well.
Yep. Oh, and actually, this article actually goes into it. We actually have a supposed director for the Obi-Wan movie too, because Stephen Daldry is in negotiations to direct that. But back into the Boba Fett movie, like, I mean, this is a step in the right direction. I'll at least say that. This is a step. We have a director. We have a writer. Now we can actually start looking towards producers. And we already know who the executive producer of this is going to be. It's going to be Disney, so it's probably going to be Kathleen Kennedy. Do we immediately assume that we're probably going to get a casting announcement for Boba Fett anytime soon?
I'd say it's too early to tell, given that they've only just secured a writer-director, and the fact that you already had one writer working on it, Simon Kinberg, who will be writing the script along with Mangold. It's very much too early to tell what the plan is at this point. So we're a long ways away from them casting the thing.
I will tell you this. I don't think it's going to be coming out right alongside Episode 9. Not anymore.
Regarding casting, even though it's not confirmed or anything, but I do know the original young Boba Fett from Episode 2, he has been very open, saying he would love to come play Boba Fett now. So who knows if that'll happen, but...
Would he be an appropriate age?
Yeah, I mean, the movie was 14 years ago, and he was a...
I'd be more worried that he was, like, older than it.
Are you thinking of Jango Fett? Because I'm talking about Daniel Logan, the young Boba Fett from Episode 2.
No. I was thinking of the kid, but it's been a long time since. So I didn't know like his actual age when he was doing that stuff. Usually, kid actors are not necessarily kid ages.
Yeah. He's just a year older than me, so he's got to be about 30, 31 by now. So
okay, yeah, that would work. I'd be more worried that he'd be the age of the original Jango Fett, and I'd be like,
Well, and even then, I mean, that could work depending on at what point in the timeline you would set the Boba Fett movie. I mean, again, clearly it would have to be before the original trilogy, or maybe even do kind of a weird Shadows of the Empire sort of thing, but set it between A New Hope and Empire, because there's a chunk of time in between those movies that could be explored as well.
The most that I can actually tell on the story.
I just saw this. He's Daniel Logan, like I said, the original Boba Fett in Episode 2. He was also Boba Fett in Star Wars: The Clone Wars, the 2010.
Yeah, he voiced him.
Series, yep. So there you go. Yeah, I guess you might as well just bring him in. He's already been doing it for years.
As to the story, I think the most that you can actually do at this point is bridge the gap. So at that point, tell how Boba, because here's the thing, Clone Wars didn't even go that far into it. They still showed him as a kid and trying to get his reputation as a bounty hunter. He didn't have it. So at that point, basically what you show here is Boba Fett earning his reputation and, you know, showing how much of a badass he is, and then eventually probably ingratiating himself to the Hutts. And that's how he gets the Han Solo mission, kind of thing. Like he gets called out by Darth Vader to do the job, kind of thing. That's what I would think that they would do with it. I don't think that they'll go way far back into Episode 2 or Episode 3 times and say what he was doing at that point. I think he was still a kid. So that's probably not the story that people want to hear. They want to see him do badass things with a rocket pack, and so I think it's going to be somewhere in between Episode 4 and 5. Just to show like him earning his reputation as a bounty hunter. Does that answer your question, Romney? Or
well, I mean it does, but again, nothing's set in stone yet. But that would probably be the more likely timeline, because that would be when Boba Fett's in his prime. Because well, that's when more interesting stuff would happen. not a lot of people would really care about watching the younger exploits. It's very much, hey, let's actually watch the Boba Fett everyone cares about, the Boba Fett in the green Mandalorian armor.
Yeah, that's actually more my question than anything else is, do you actually show him in the Mandalorian armor? Or do you show him young enough where he doesn't feel like he's earned it? Because here's the thing, expanded universe stuff that I've ever read or seen, they don't put him in the armor. He's either too small for it or he feels like he hasn't earned it. And so at that point, do we walk into a situation where he feels he earns it? And he's in the green armor, the rusted up armor, or is he in an armor that's a little bit more polished, hasn't rusted out as much? Like maybe he took care of the armor. We don't know.
Maybe.
So, all right. Well, I think that's pretty much all we can do with this one. Hopefully we'll be able to see some more details from the Boba Fett movie sometime soon. I'm just telling you right here now, if you're expecting this thing coming out in 2019, probably not. Probably 2021 at the most. Is when this is going to be happening. And let's go ahead and wrap things up for the evening. So if people want to be able to reach out to us and give their opinions on the opinions that we've shared, or be able to check out the content that we create, whether it be on YouTube or other social media, Alex the Shadow Blazer, how do they do that for you?
Find me here on YouTube. Shadow Blazer 3000 is my channel, and I do anime-related content. And find me on Twitter, social media, to always be aware of when a new video goes up, or just listen to my daily rantings at Alex J. Short on Twitter. I do want to advise people, the two places try not to contact me on is anything like Google messaging or Discord, because I almost never check those. I never have a real big need to check those, so it turns out somebody did message me on Discord. I think
he checks them enough to upload videos, and that's about it.
That's about it. Just I don't have any reason to be there most of the time, but it was Rising Sun, I think. He did message me. I feel very bad. I'm sorry, Rising Sun, if you're listening to this at some point, that I totally missed your message. I noticed it like a week or two later. So don't really just contact me on Twitter, because I get notifications of when people talk to me on Twitter, or again, just reach out to me and put a comment on a YouTube video. Don't private message me, because most of the time I won't see those either.
Yep. Or YouTube will decide to change around the chronology of your private messages, and then you're just going to be screwed.
Probably.
It's probably going to be the way it goes. Stephen Romney of Studio Ghost Utah, how do people get a hold of you?
Well, you can find me under the handle Studio Ghost Utah. That is my handle both on YouTube and on Facebook. I upload to both. I haven't really uploaded anything this month because, well, this month has kind of put me through the ringer. But as for this week's Romney's recommendation, which has been one of the few comforts that I've enjoyed during this particular week where I've been put through the ringer, it's another Netflix series, given that we've mentioned Netflix series quite frequently throughout this evening. And I am going to recommend the Sanrio Netflix anime series, Agretzko. Now, it was a show I did not expect to like as much as I have, because again, I know what you're thinking. Romney, really? A Sanrio series? Aren't those the people who make Hello Kitty? Well, Agretzko is very much a cartoon aimed at adults. It's not like Family Guy quality, but it's very much a case of, hey, this is meant for people who are stuck working these soul-crushing office jobs that are slowly driving them insane. This is a cartoon for those people, as the cartoon follows the main character, Let's-Go, a red panda who works at an office who decides to blow off steam by singing death metal. It's absolutely hilarious. The English dub is really good, so if you're a purist, you can watch it subbed. I also like the English dub. So that's this week's Romney's recommendation, is the Netflix Sanrio anime series, Agretzko.
All right. And if people want to be able to get a hold of me, the best place to reach out to me is on Twitter at Drac2326. But while you're here on my channel, make sure to check out all the content that I do provide. In fact, you guys can check out a lot of awesome stuff that just barely started this week. I actually finished up Diablo 2. We're getting ready to do the expansion the following week, because I'm going to be working on podcast stuff this week. And then I also started my WoW Battle for Azeroth coverage, where we're going to be doing allied races. So you guys can check that out there, as well as the podcast and all of the other stuff that I provide on YouTube. If you want to support the podcast, and we strongly encourage you to be able to support the podcast so we can keep the lights on around here and we can keep this going and continue to have the ideas flow, because guys, we have lots of ideas that we want to be able to do for the podcast. The best way to support the podcast is to support the RSS feed. So go to geekyweek.podomatic.com and show your support there. Or you can look up the GNRO podcast or Geek News Reviews and Opinions podcast on iTunes or on Google Play for Android users. So make sure to support there. And then also make sure to support the podcast on social media so that we know what you guys want in particular of a specific story or episode. And the best way to do that is under the exact same tagline on either Facebook or Twitter, which is Geeky NRO. Just look that up on Facebook or Twitter, and you'll be put into our channel or to our Twitter handle or our Facebook page, and you'll be able to get up to them information when we go live, the stuff we'll be covering, the stuff we might not necessarily be able to cover, all that awesome stuff you guys can get access to. And if you want to be able to provide stories as well as provide discussion topics, you can do so at geekyweek@gmail.com. And that's going to go ahead and do it for this evening. Thank you guys so much for your continued love, patience, support, all that fun stuff. We really do appreciate it, not just individually, but also as a podcast. We really do appreciate all the help you guys give. And we will be back next week for even more geek news, reviews, and opinions. So for me, for Romney, and for Alex, we'll see you guys next time.